You're listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, James Payne, and I'm joined here with Northern Hunter co-founding members Dalton Gray and Mariah Humphreys.
Howdy.
And we are all very fortunate to be sitting here with the first man to really believe in what we're doing here at the Northern Hunter and our flagship sponsor, Mr. Ryan Lampers from StHealthy Hunter. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, guys.
Awesome.
Doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on here today.
Hey, we appreciate you being here. It's it's a real pleasure, and you know we've been talking about your products for some time, so it's nice to have you on the show. So
yeah, I know it's great. I love what you guys are doing. I tell Dalton all the time. I'm trying not to make his head too big, but you know, your guys' podcast is crushing. I just love the information. It's like this new data set of information that you guys are putting out into the podcast space. And you know, honestly, I've been a little burnt out with a lot of the stuff that I hear out there. Often the same stuff, but you guys have cranked out a ton of podcasts already on your short journey here, and they're good, man. Really good, informative. And I was joking, Dalton's maybe it sucks, but I'm just so into Alaska right now that it's good for me. So I'm going to keep listening to it.
You know,
that's great.
So we're actually to a place now. We have more out-of-state listeners than in-state listeners.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. That's great. No, good for you guys.
Well, you know, and kind of the whole thing with it is just see a need, fill a need, right? I mean, there's just kind of a lack of that specific information. So hopefully we're meeting the bar, but you know, we're doing our best.
Yeah, it's definitely a high level. It's, you know, it's not just kind of, you know, talking about Alaska in a general sense, but you guys are diving deep. Like it's great getting into the nitty gritty. And, you know, when I first met Dalton, this past year, you know, we could tell young man, but wise beyond his years. It feels like when you talk to him for his age. So go figure. You guys are nailing this stuff.
Awesome.
Good, great information.
Well, we appreciate that very much, man. So, but so you clearly have a pretty big following of your own in the industry, and I'm sure a lot of people know who you are and your backstory. But for people that might not, give us a little bit of a quick overview, and just kind of what content you make, kind of what your overall goal with the content you make is, and you know, talk a little bit about your company too, the StHealthy Hunter that you and your wife Hillary run, and products and stuff like that. I mean, we all here at the Northern Hunter, we love talking about your products, and even more than that, we love using your products. So, so that's cool. Yeah, just take.
Well, if it works in Alaska, it'll work anywhere, right? So,
yeah, that's the idea.
Yep. So first off, about that following. Yeah, it looks like there's a big following out there if you're looking at IG, but that was never my goal or intent in any way. We've talked about this before in the past with, you know, I refused social media for as long as I could until my lovely wife started an Instagram page for me. And she literally wrote up the first few posts, and I didn't even know what it was all about. And she coaxed me into it by saying, folks would love hearing some of your stories, you know, the hunting stories that only get told, you know, when I get back from a trip to the family, the immediate family. So that was her motivation, I guess, not to grow a following or any of that stuff. And somehow, some way, it's gotten big.
So it's
again, though, good. This would have never happened without her. And then, like guys like Brian Call, you know, like, you guys know Brian. I think you just did a podcast with him. He is a great podcaster, a great speaker. Very, very well thought out man. I respect him in a lot of ways, and we've become good hunting partners. And I guess if I'm attached to Brian, the following grows or whatever. But him and I have linked up on a lot of things. We've done a lot of films together at this point. It's funny. I met Brian, it's been half a dozen years ago now, on a train to hunt event. It was a kind of a Spartan race for hunters, I guess you could say. That's 3 course, you know, where we'd shoot our bows. And accuracy was a major importance to get the higher scores, and running or hiking with weight pills, covering distances with 80 pounds on your back, and maybe some burpees and push-ups and sit-ups and all the things in between, right? It was just like a perfect little race for testing yourself against others. We met at one of those events long back when I was doing those, and somehow, some way, he threw a camera in my face and did a little film about that day, and then he boldly reached out at some point and invited himself on a bear hunt that I was doing with a good buddy of mine. Who invites themselves, by the way? You guys ever do that? By yourself on somebody else?
No.
Yeah, what a jerk. Right? But I'm glad he did. We had a great time. That was a year where he came with us. We ended up taking 5 bears on that trip.
Wow. Nice.
People really enjoyed watching it later. It was a crazy experience. And since then, we've done too many hunts, to count with Brian, and we hunt well together. So it's worked out well. But so where it kind of started, I met my wife in Alaska back in the day. I'm 49 years old right now. We've been married for 25 years.
Very nice.
Somehow, some way, I found a Montana girl in the wilds of Alaska while I was guiding fishermen up there back in my early 20s.
Okay.
And this, I went up there because my love of fishing was pretty strong back then, and absolutely loved, just the wildness of getting to Alaska. So I spent 7 years doing that. And then a couple of years over on Kamchatka in Russia, doing it over there as well. So I got to explore that Kamchatka Peninsula, which was
awesome.
A ton of fun. Saw a lot of bears, saw a lot of wildlife, caught a lot of giant fish, a lot of rainbows on the east side of the peninsula, and a lot of steelhead and salmon on the west side of the peninsula.
Nice.
Got to experience that. But the first year I was up there, I ended up meeting my wife. Like I said, this hot chick comes off of a plane coming there to work for a summer. And, I was this young, clean shaven 21-year-old or something. And I was there. My purpose was to climb the ranks in the guide space and try to be the best fishing guide I could be. But hot chick comes off a plane to work for the summer. And long story short, we ended up getting married a couple years later, and we've been married ever since. So
awesome.
That's great.
That was how we met. And since then, we actually were in Washington, had a little house in Granite Falls, Washington for 21 years, I believe. And then for the last 5, we came back to the home state of Hill and the hometown of Hill. We're out in Three Forks, but she grew up in Bozeman. Back when Bozeman was cool and quiet and small, not such a rat race.
Yeah.
Man, I was down there in January we went to Yellowstone for New Year's, and so we flew through there, and man, that place is popping these days. I mean, it is huge. I mean, I can't even count the number of construction projects I saw going on there with the multiple 5-story tall, 1,000-foot wide apartment complexes. And just, man, it was just,
we needed more Duttons, John Duttons. It's unfortunately, it looks like Dutton's lost because we're booming and there's airports and everything every which way here. But it's Main Street is much different now than it was my wife's era when she was here. But unfortunately.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the StHealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. StHealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to StHealthyHunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All StHealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA. What got you into wanting to come to Alaska to being a fishing guide? You mentioned that you had a love for fishing back in your younger years, and then you traveled to Alaska. So kind of talk about where you worked in the fishing industry up here. What part of the state? What did you specialize in? And then did you, after that section of your life wrapped up, you went back to Washington with your wife now and, kind of put in roots there? Were you going back and forth from Alaska to Washington all those years, or how did that work? And just kind of give us some backstory there.
Yeah. So I when I graduated high school, my life revolved around bird hunting, skiing in the winter, and fishing throughout the year.
Nice.
I absolutely loved climbing into high lakes, alpine lakes. Washington has a bajillion of them. Going up, catching cuts and brooks and rainbows and whatever. Mm-hmm. And then steelheading was my absolute far and away biggest passion back in the day.
Yeah.
From spring steelhead all the way through winter fishing. And, when I was a little kid, we had my dad actually started a bait business of all things back in Washington State.
Okay.
It's called Raised Bait. And he supplied stores. He grew up from just pumping sand shrimp out of a beach with a clam gun to going full commercial with the water gun, and it advanced quickly back in the late 70s. But then I would go out, and my first job, even 5-6 years old, I was out there on the beach pumping sand shrimp with my dad. Mm-hmm. You put the hole over your thumb over the hole, and it's a little suction thing. And then it advanced to a plunge type system to pull sand shrimp, which are a burrowing shrimp, out of the sand. Mm. And then it went to a water system. Basically, we had a boat water pump that would push 300 feet of fire hose up onto the beach with a PVC at the end of it and blow sand, which would cause the shrimp to come up, and you'd pick shrimp, put them in buckets. It was a great job in my youth.
Sounds like
about 6 hours on the beach every low tide. You get 3 going out, 3 going back in, and you're just out there filling 5-gallon buckets full of sand shrimp. And then my dad would go back and sell them to these stores.
Nice.
Most guys were chasing steelhead. So I guess in saying that, yeah, my love of fishing was pretty strong. My dad really got me into it. My whole family fishes a ton. They're blackmouth nerds, so they fish, feeder kings out in the San Juans, up on the Canadian side and down into the Washington side, and they're always placing top of the derbies, 1, 2, or 3, and they're just absolute nuts when it comes to fishing.
Yeah.
So my dad would often go off to work and just drop me off on a river, way before I could drive, and just leave me there with all the old dudes on the river trying to catch their 2 steelhead for the day. And so I got to know quite a bit of those guys, and I started it was always a competition, last thing an old guy wants to do is have some young, 14-year-old out fishing for the day. And that was always the goal. But, my dad was a legend when it comes to steelheading in the Northwest. And so I got a good reputation for catching fish when nobody else could. And that recognition got me to Alaska. I was offered a guide job and went up there, and I spent 7 years doing it at a place called on the Alagnac, so southwest down there on the Alagnac system.
Yeah,
everything that comes out of Nonvonic and Kukaklik that goes down into Bristol Bay, that stretch, and we do a lot of fly out rivers from channels that would come into all those big lakes, Iliamna, and all those rivers around there. So we got to do a lot of fishing. It was a blast, man. Sight fishing, behind spawning sockeye for those big bows that would get sucked up into those channels. Was probably one of my favorite things, you could ever do. And then we we did everything from catching pike in the frogwater to catching all 5 species of salmon that ran those rivers on the Alagnac for years.
Yeah.
And that would consume about 5 months out of my year. I'd go up there in April and undo or undig the pipes, trying to thaw everything out like you do every year. We'd spend weeks doing that before the clients started showing up, and the pipes would be thawed out. And there's always a lot of things to do around camp, from all the wood to get cut to everything, camp life before clients showed up. And once clients showed up around the 1st of June, we started out chasing, often sockeye kings, rainbows, grayling, all that kind of stuff, depending on what they wanted to do for the day. And a couple times, a couple summers, I ended up going down and fishing the Sandy River down on the chain there, down on the peninsula.
Yeah.
And fished that. Man, I don't know if you guys have been down into that country much, down on the chain, but that is some cool country down there. We had a stretch where it wasn't too far down to the beach, so we literally swing flies catching kings. As you could see their backs coming out of the salt, if they could beat this mass quantity of sea lions, the lucky one that could get up the creek without getting torn up.
Yeah.
We could literally watch that fish make it up the little riffles at the bottom, right where it dumps into the ocean, settle into the pool, swing flies, and catch that fish almost with guaranteed success. It was just, they were so hot and so aggressive. You could swing flies fast and you're just catching about every king in there, it felt like.
That sounds
but
awesome.
We went and fished those kings on a fly for a full summer doing that. Some of the best fishing I've ever seen. It was great. So I got to see that part of Alaska as well. And I absolutely loved it. If it wasn't for me finding the woman of my life, I'd probably still be doing it up there. But she enjoyed it for a while. 1 year, she didn't come back. She wanted to see it once, and it just wasn't for her. A bunch of smelly guides, that spend all their time in Alaska and digging up, permafrosted pipes and in a camp with like a couple ladies there is not a place that she really thought was great anymore. So
can't imagine why.
I completely understand.
It was a great. I don't regret my time in Alaska at all. I miss it. And then I took a large hiatus from even going up there. I came back and worked the family business for years and grew it. We retired my folks from it, and it's still cranking. I walked away from it and did other things, but it still provides for several families over there in Washington State.
That's awesome.
That's great.
And so do you still try to make it up there like these days, or is hunting pretty much taken over? Kind of more of the hunting side of things taking over the passion, I should say.
On the Alaska front?
Yeah.
I haven't been back since my my stint when I was fishing to just fish. Now it's you kind of have to eliminate some things, right? I used to bird hunt. Right. I used to bird hunt like a maniac, and I loved chucker hunting, the breaks and coulee country, the steep stuff along the Snake and all that country. Loved it. And it felt like that was the ultimate challenge, is trying to get your 6 chucker for the day in that country.
Yeah.
And then, it wasn't till late teens that the big game bug just got me good. And, it's progressively gotten worse. And now the last 10 years, it's really bad. And I'm just chasing the bigger stuff as much as possible.
Yeah.
I have neglected my bird hunting dogs, unfortunately. And I have really neglected my love of fishing as well. So,
there's only so much time in the year.
Your battles.
Yeah. There's only so much time.
When you got kids, I've got 2 daughters, and, I can't be selfish to just go do my own thing. So if I can take them, and we go fishing, with them, we take them to a lot of places and do that still. So it's good.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, so you had mentioned your family business and everything, and kind of running that, and you run, along with your wife now, you run your own business in the hunting industry, the StHealthy Hunter. And again, we love all the products that you guys make. I know Dalton's really gotten us all onto the supplements from the StHealthy Nutrition side of things, and getting onto that in preparation for this coming season and everything. And the rifle cover, the scope and crown cover, as it's called on the website, is just a phenomenal piece. So what's a little bit of a backstory on some of those items? Like what kind of need did you see or struggles you had that you felt this product needed to come to the industry?
Sure. Yeah. And before I get to that, James, I do want to mention, it's funny because all those years of guiding up there was all fly fishing, right? It was very heavily fly fishing on all the places that we went. And yet my family business was bait fishing. So you can see
right.
I don't know what you call it, but there's like bait guys don't really care. Fly guys, they're pretty uppity a lot of times.
No,
I absolutely love fly fishing. It's the crowds behind it and the groups and the elitist mentality that was a huge turnoff, and it just it makes me not to want to do that anymore. I got really deep into the fly fishing world, and the more I got into it, the more I realized these guys are just very snooty and very uppity and better than thou,
Right.
And,
right.
It bothered me. It just bothered me a lot. Similar to that of bow hunters at times. It bothers me. It makes me want to be only a rifle guy when I see it. But in saying that, like I still love fly fishing. I love bait fishing. I love all of it. I think there's a place for everyone. Sure would be nice if there wasn't this arrogance about you got to do it this way or no way.
Right.
I think we'd have a lot less little battles out there in the outdoors space. But
and honestly, that's been a huge reason for me to stay away from fly fishing as well. I do a lot of cast fishing. I like getting out and chasing the trout and the salmon and pike and things like that. But when I've tried to get into fly fishing in the past and talk to some people about it, you do run into that quite a bit where there's just that mentality, I guess, that
elitism.
If you don't have this raw or this reel and this, it's I don't know. It's just,
right.
It's very. It turns you off quite a bit.
It's so annoying, isn't it? I mean, the world that they live in. I was a part of it for a long time. I mean, if you even said the word pole, like God forbid you say pole. It's rod, sir. It's like they get so offended. They're the first people to get offended so easily in today's society. I feel like it's rod. How dare you say pole? Now there was just an elitism there, and some of my best buddies are fly guys. And I have to keep them knocked off their high horse on occasion. It's a culture. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, it's very similar to like the sheep hunting world up here. I know on our podcast with Brian, we kind of hit on this topic of elitism, and you see that a lot in the hunting industry now, even in the big game world with sheep hunting. And it's very easy, especially for us as Alaskans, to become a little bit spoiled, if you will, with our abundant opportunity of the variety that we have to choose from up here.
Yeah.
And just because we have the ability to go sheep hunting with an over-the-counter permit, without a guide, and we can go every year if we want to. I know guys that have killed rams for years and years consecutively that are great sheep hunters, but it's really easy if you're not consciously aware and keeping it in check. It's really easy to get that mindset of, well, cool, you're from Idaho or Montana. You might only get to come to Alaska to sheep hunt once in your life, but I'm up here because I can do this every year and I kill rams and look at how many sheep I have on my wall. And well, you haven't even done it yet. And that's not the right mindset to have. And I know with Brian, we hit on this. You guys have done a great job with you and Brian of making films of, let's just say, spring black bear hunting down there in the lower 48 in country that a lot of Alaskans would look at the lower 48 and say, well, they don't have anything like we have up here. And while the vegetation is going to be different, the terrain can be much the same. and you guys are going up into the steepest of places. You're encountering mountain goats. You're up in the high stuff to get these bears. And Alaskans sheep hunters particularly love to look down their nose at people because, well, you don't have to go where I have to go to kill sheep. Well, that's not always true for every other species. I've seen some grizzly bears that have been above where the sheep are. That there are certainly some bear hunts, especially up here, where a fella could go out for the same 10 to 14 day block, live out of his backpack, go ultra lightweight, pound the miles, and kill a grizzly bear or a black bear and put in just as much effort as you have to physically put into a sheep hunt. Now, obviously, you're not judging horn size and full curl or 8 years old, and that aspect of bear hunting is different, but it doesn't make sheep hunting better. It's just different, and that's something that we've really had to discuss amongst ourselves, and really want to present this to our listeners, that don't let other people look down on you and make you feel like you're less than whatever they think they are. Oftentimes, like you mentioned earlier, that they just got a big head, and they've watched one too many YouTube videos about one thing or another, and they're an expert on this and that. And if they've killed a couple of Dall sheep, well, then they're the next they're the next great Jack O'Connor of the world in their mind. And if you haven't sheep hunted, then, well, you're not a true mountain hunter unless you sheep hunt, and that's just not true.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's gone that way for a lot of folks, right? I mean, the ego aspect in the hunting space is real for sure. Yeah, the sheep thing is probably a thing. Most of us just can't afford one. We're not residents of Alaska. We just can't afford it, or we do it.
Right.
But I wouldn't put a high country mule deer hunt below sheep hunting in any way. If you're in the right country, it's really just as hard.
Yeah.
We're in sheep country all the time. We hunt bears in sheep country. We see great rams in sheep country a lot. Same with goats. We're filling our frames with often mountain goats and bears in the same periphery. I'm on a set of 12s. It's commonplace on some of these bear hunts, even, and they just take you to the best of places. One thing I'll point out, I think, Alaska's, you guys got so much great opportunity, but also it's pretty game rich. And to compare, like I've noticed in places like, so Washington, I would say, kicks out some incredibly good hunters, like guys that have had to figure it out. The hunting's not great over there. It's a tough sell. Like you gotta be really on your game.
Yeah.
Whereas we used to make fun, like, man, these Idaho guys got it so easy. Come in and get something right away. And it's like, man, we really have to work on the Washington side. There's got to be something to that, because some of the best hunters I know come from places, not just Washington, Oregon as well, places where the hunting is difficult. They've really had to learn the ins and outs and figure out those little intricate things that make them a better hunter, and really dial it in, compared to if you're in an area of plenty, say Colorado mule deer guy, you might not have to spend as much time figuring out these little pieces. So, I wouldn't say, a guy from Colorado is going to be a better hunter than a guy from Washington. I'd probably say the opposite, just because there's a lot more opportunities in Colorado than a place like Washington. And those guys, geez, to dial it in over there, they really got to do some work.
Yeah.
But, the comparison thing is funny. It kind of like, you take a look at the bow hunting part. I love bow hunting. I do it a lot, but there's guys out there that love to tout, I'm only a bow hunter. I only do it this way because of whatever. And that's great. But the virtue signaling that comes along with it, I feel like it's annoying at times, because I could take, like, I know when we go bow hunting for, say, early season mule deer, we're going to areas that are often above tree line, summer range, out in the wide open. I mean, let's be honest. It's not a hard hunt. It's not a hard hunt. Those bucks are out in the open. very visible, grouped together. Awesome hunt. Love it. But I'm not going to say that the guy going in being successful with a bow every year, chasing early season mule deer, is necessarily any more skilled than a guy that's going out with his rifle late season in some absolute ruddy conditions, low density, tough environment. You know, we hunt places where it's just tough to get into. The challenge is getting into a spot and then finding a good buck, because they're so few and far between. You know, we're not hunting these summer range conditions. So, you know, is the bow hunter better or is the rifle guy better?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think that bothers me as well. Like I said, you dive deep into the bow hunting world and you hang out at bow shops too often, there's an ego there that annoys the crap out of me, and I just want to go out and do a rifle hunt when I see it.
Well, I think we touched on this before too, but you can see it in the brands that market products for sheep hunters, right? You see a brand that comes out with a jacket or a pair of pants or a set of rain gear, and this is perfect for your backcountry sheep hunt. And the marketing is so heavily geared towards the ultralight sheep hunting world. And don't get me wrong, I love ultralight gear that I don't have to carry a whole lot of weight to get the result that I want. I love that. But it's really easy to get wrapped up in, well, you know, all my gear is strictly Kuiu or strictly Sitka or strictly Stone Glacier. And while all those companies make great products, I'll tell you right now, I've got a mashup of all three of those brands in my closet right now.
Right.
And there are certain things that I like and certain things that I really don't like from each of those companies. And they each have figured out something really good in their space. And I'm not going to get off into the technical details of that, but I've used I've gone through years of using each of those three companies' gear in a full kit for an entire season. And after that, I'll weed out, okay, I didn't like that, I really liked that, or this didn't fit quite right, and I just weed out what I want. And you don't have to have matching camouflage or camouflage at all for that matter to be a successful hunter. And but it's really easy. People can get wrapped up in the marketing of a particular brand for buying clothing geared for sheep hunting. And I know guys, man, you see these guys walk into your local sporting goods store all the time, and they've got on a Kuiu jacket, and they're about 5'5" and weigh about 250. And he ain't climbing the mountains for nothing. You know, he's riding into his area and he's killing something and he's riding it back out. He would never even consider picking up a hunk of meat and putting it on his back. It's going from the animal's carcass to the top of his four-wheeler. And while I don't really care if somebody does that, that's fine. Great that you're getting out there. But don't act like you're better than the rest of the crowd because, well, I'm wearing Kuiu gear or I'm wearing Sitka, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a problem that I've seen happen a lot more recently here in the last couple of years, is where just walking around town, not everybody's a sheep hunter, but they're all wearing brands that heavily market their stuff for that sect of consumer. And I mean, let's just be real here. You don't need ultralight packable stuff to kill a moose or a caribou. Oftentimes, like I mentioned, you're riding a four-wheeler or a boat or getting dropped off by a plane. You're not moving camp on your back all that much. For a guy like that, you don't need to go out and spend $350 on a down coat.
No.
Because
flannel and a Carhartt will do just fine.
Because it doesn't matter how much it weighs, because you don't have to carry it anywhere unless you're wearing it, right? And so I think people get intimidated trying to break into the Alaska hunting space because they feel like, well, I have to have this brand rain jacket and I have to have this brand of boots, and the cost and barrier of entry, seemingly as is pressured by the marketing world, is so high. People just say, well, you know what? I guess I just can't afford to be a hunter in Alaska. And that's a shame.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that miss out on experiences because they feel like they don't belong, if that makes sense.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, to put it simply, well, when I think of like one of my biggest elk hunting mentors, I've said this story in the past. He was a gentleman by the name of Dallas Blood. Really cool name, right? Last name of Blood.
No kidding.
That is a very
he was an educator. I met him. I was guiding when I'd be down in Alaska. I'd guide these lakes. I'd lease lakes and stock them and have guys come out and teach them how to fly cast and catch them these giant trout. Well, I met Dallas from a gentleman who came out, and he was telling me about this guy. It was his old coach, and the guy I had out was a ex Seahawks player. It was John Freeze. It was like this legendary quarterback from Idaho, right?
Okay.
And he was a Seahawk now, and I was guiding him out on these lakes. And he told me about his old baseball coach named Dallas Blood. This hardened old timer, worked at the mill when he wasn't doing stuff. His wife was the postal lady. And he's like, man, I got to hook you guys up. He's probably sharpening broadheads right now as we speak. Oh, well, I got to know this guy.
Nice.
Invite him out and, bring him out next week and we'll catch him a bunch of fish. And so he did. And I met this gentleman, very nice, down to earth guy, passionate about elk hunting, the North Country of Idaho, thick country. And I fished him that summer. He said, come on out in September. You can stay with me. We'll go. I'll show you everything I know when it comes to archery, elk hunting, and calling. I'd done some elk hunting, up until that point, but I wanted a better education on it from guys that really, really took it seriously. I wanted to know how to call in bulls better than everybody else.
Right.
And so I went and I spent 3 weeks a year with old Dallas Blood. Stayed at his house. We went every day. We weren't hiking in anywhere. We would drive to a spot and pitch bugles and climb down into these drainages. And I ended up getting a bull with them. Ended up getting a bull the next year. And the guy taught me a ton. But the man rarely wore camo. He would on occasion. It was like the Walmart real tree stuff, that was faded. It pretty much was more white than green at that point. And oftentimes what would get thrown on in the mornings before we hopped in the truck was like a blue flannel, plaid flannel.
Yeah.
And that would stay on throughout the day while we're elk hunting. There's no BS with this guy. He was like, it doesn't matter, right? The camo doesn't matter. It's broken up. And he killed bulls with ways that people wouldn't even think of right now. They think it has to be done a certain way and they have to be head to toe camouflage. And it's just not the case. I mean, this guy was killing bulls for years and years and years, archery hunting with a flannel on, a blue one, or camo that wasn't camo anymore, clothing.
Yeah.
And his gear was ancient, but he was very successful. And man, he taught me so much being with that guy. He cut the curve for me a lot.
Yeah. The reason that story makes me smile so much is because if you go to our website at thenorthernhunter.com and you go to the About page, it has a little bit about who we are as the guys. And my picture there is me with a spring bear that I had taken. And I'm wearing a blue flannel in the picture.
Nice.
So I like that. Yeah. That sounds... and it's very true. Oh, yeah. You don't need to be wearing crazy expensive $400 or $500 jackets when you're out there. I mean, that flannel was a Christmas gift for my mom, and I've taken it hunting a bunch. I have a red one now that I carry out that my wife got me, and I have some nice gear for more backcountry stuff, but it's just you don't need it to get into the world. Right. And I think that's a message that needs to be preached a lot more, because like you said, we don't need gatekeepers keeping people out of the world, because all that's going to do is hurt the future of hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I love the fact that we've got so many like quality camouflage companies, I guess you could say, or hunting companies that are building really quality gear. It's great. I mean, I love supporting, there's a lot of good quality people behind these companies, feeding families. So I don't mind that at all. I think, like you said, it shouldn't be that it costs someone $1,000 in clothes to get themselves to go out and try a hunt, take on a hunt. It's not necessary. It's a luxury to have that kind of clothing for sure, right? I like it. I like camo. It kind of distinguishes you as being a hunter, which we should be proud of.
Right.
But on the other side of it, let's not kid ourselves into thinking that it's necessary. It's just not necessary.
Right. Yeah.
We've been hunting in solids for a lot of years, and that's not just rifle hunts. It's bow hunts. It's all the hunts.
Right.
And you don't have to have a high end solid. You don't have to have a high end camo to get out there and do it. It's just, in the early days, I wasn't wearing the high end stuff. That's for dang sure.
Yeah.
But as you get older, you want to kick it up a notch and put all your extra dollars into the hobby that you care about the most, right? So you end up upgrading here and there, but it definitely shouldn't turn anybody away.
Yeah.
The dollars that can be spent aren't necessarily the dollars that need to be spent to go take on a trip.
Right.
I'd rather advise somebody to get tags and get experiences over gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And it kind of falls back to, there's a saying with a lot of different ventures you can take in life where it's, perfect is the enemy of good. And a big part of just doing something in life is just starting. Don't wait until you're perfect. Don't wait. And that's kind of what we did with this show.
I was just going to say.
We didn't, we spent a lot of time. I mean, I think we planned this for a year before we ever launched an episode, roughly 10 months somewhere in there. But we didn't know exactly how it was going to lay out. We had our basic format. We had our basic idea, but just get it started. Just get it going. And that goes for anything in life is just start with what you've got and adjust as you go. Yeah. Because then you'll figure out what you really need. You might go spend $2,000 on lightweight hunting gear and not use half of it. But if you go out there with your flannel and your and your other clothes, your Carhartt pants and things like that, and you realize
you might decide that you hate it too, and then you just blew all your money on expensive stuff, and maybe you don't like sheep hunting.
And just to kind of to one thing, last thing with us and the show and this company is actually part of that whole planning phase. When we were looking at what we wanted for our logo, we were going back and forth on what animal and things like that. And this is kind of where the whole anti-elitism has really been set in, even from before day one with us. Yeah, is we had gone back and forth. Do we want a bear? Do we want a sheep? What kind of animal do we want to represent? And we do have a Dall sheep on our webpage as a background photo, but for the logo, we actually went with a caribou. And the reason for that is it's a very Alaska representative animal, and it's a very anti-elitism, I guess. Yeah. It's very,
nobody shooting caribou thinks they're all that in a bag of chips.
And so from day one, we have definitely.
But yet, all of us absolutely love caribou hunting.
Oh, absolutely! And, it's so much fun.
Honestly, it's probably one of the more fun species to hunt up here. Yeah, it's just a blast. There's no stress with caribou hunting, man. There's just not.
Find the trail. Yeah, sit on it until they come back.
And anybody who talks about what a great caribou hunter they are, they just know how to get in front of them. There is no strategy. There is no catching them. They're
going to run up that hill and then run right back down for no reason.
They don't know what they're doing 10 minutes before they decide to do it. So,
I know a guy that can shoot one at 1,000 yards with his 45-70.
Yeah, do you really?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the anti-elitism thought that went into that logo. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's great.
All right, folks, I want to take a second to tell you about a product I found this last year and have absolutely fallen in love with. It's the StHealthy Hunter rifle cover. I used one on a recent black-tailed deer hunt in southeast Alaska, and it did a great job of keeping the salt water and debris out of the action and also protecting the scope on my rifle from getting knocked around and damaged. On top of all that, the carry handle made it easy to transport the rifle to and from the boat during the hunt. When it got wet from rain and ocean spray, I hung it up at camp to dry at night, and it was always dry in 20 minutes or less. StHealthy Hunter also offers a wide variety of nutritional supplements for the outdoorsman, such as CBD oils, essential vitamins, turmeric, and bone broth. In the gear shop, they also have a lightweight first aid kit, glassing pads, and stuff sacks to organize your gear and your pack. Go check out StHealthy Hunter's website and use the code TheNorthernHunter at checkout to get a discount on your order today. All StHealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
I know we talked about this a second ago, but wrap back around to the StHealthy Nutrition and the product side of things. So what kind of spurred you and your wife to begin making or having these products made, like the rifle cover, the glassing pad, and then all the nutritional side of the company as well? Just give us some background on that for our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, it's kind of like what you're just talking about, like jumping in before you know what you're doing on certain things. You have to start somewhere. And,
yeah.
Hill and I never intended or planned on, it wasn't in the works to have a product company as one of the businesses that we tackle, as if we didn't have enough things on the plate. But, there was a couple of things that made sense to me, very simple items, like you guys have talked about the rifle cover and the glassing pad. Such a simple little piece that I just wanted myself selfishly. And it worked for me. And, it's nothing that's like next level innovation, but it's what I wanted. It's what I felt like would work great for the hunts that we go on. I couldn't care less about if the stock on my rifle gets scratched up or any of that. But what I did care about is keeping the needles and the dirt and the dust and the moisture and the snow off of my optics, off my scope, and keeping crud out of the barrel, the two nightmare scenarios that when you need your gun the most or the quickest, you might have something like that happen where you've accidentally crammed it into some dirt and you got to fiddle fart around with cleaning it out and pull the bolt and all that. But yeah, I think, as far as the rifle cover goes, it was just something that me and a gentleman down here, Christian, started fiddle farting around with and throwing ideas out and played with it and kind of felt like we perfected it to how we wanted it. It's not perfect for everyone. It's just something that worked for us, just as a lightweight option in the mountains for the hunts that we do, to basically just the two things I mentioned was keep the barrel free, as well as keep the junk out of the optics of the scope. And it had a handle on there. We put that on there and quickly realized that was a big benefit. I love the fact that I can just slowly set my pack down. If I need to move to get into position, I pull it off the pack, hold on to the handle, go over, get set up in a spot, and then that glassing pad is what I use for my backrest. So it's fitting. It's not just for glassing, spring bears all day in the cold rocks or the snow or the wet or whatever. It also really huge part of our shooting platform when we're using it as a backrest. It's very easy to adjust on elevation and such. And it wasn't intended when we first built it, but the stiffness of the pad itself, it just works very well. It's not too soft back there. So it's been great for that. And we're also not guys that are shooting 1,000 yards. So I know there'll be people that will say, well, you could do better as a backrest. Sure. We don't need to, because we're not shooting beyond 400 yards. We try to get 300 in. This probably isn't the best for 1,000-yard guy that really wants something set in place, as a backrest. But it works for how we hunt, and so we use it that way. And we shoot very, very, very well off of it. Yeah. So,
and just to give
those
folks
two pieces were.
I was just going to interrupt just real quick here. When you say backrest, you're folding the glassing pad over in half and then putting that under the rear of the rifle as a rear support. And when you say elevation, so if you're shooting off a bipod, you can adjust up and down off of that rear rest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well said.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
No, I just want to make sure that folks could get a picture of what you guys were doing. And I mean, really any of the videos that you're in where you're taking shots from a prone position, which are most of them anyway, you'll be able to see you guys using that routinely for that purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but that's what it was for. And just those two little pieces kind of started everything off, and we've added a few things since. As far as the supplement line that we've kind of built up here.
Yeah.
That was a product of my wife. You know, I'm old, I'll say that, and I'm not getting younger. And she has kept me feeling younger than I probably should feel at this stage of my life. All the pack trips, but
Yeah.
you know, she's educated me for a very long while as to the food I should be eating versus the food I'd prefer to be eating. And also the supplements that you know I take and make the most sense. I've never been all that into supplements. I have a hard time taking a multivitamin. But on the other side of it, there's ones that there's an importance to it when it comes to certain things that we do that we need it for. CBD, for example. Never in a million years would I thought I'd have a CBD business. Not in 2 million years. You know, that was something that my wife got me taking. And I realized quickly that I felt better on it.
Yeah.
And it originated because I was coming away at the end of a season after going at it hard for 4 months.
Yeah.
You know, December would come along, and as soon as you quit doing it, I was smoked. You know, I had inflammation, I had joint pain. I felt older than I was. And then, you know, my wife got me taking CBD and turmeric, those two things, krill oil. She got me working on my gut so that I would digest food better and have a better immune system when I'm out there beating the tar out of my body. Just things that make sense for someone that wants to feel better in the long run. And, you know, as a hunter, I don't know any hunter that doesn't want to hunt till he's 80. And so, you know, I don't want this to be a few more years. I want this to be a lot more years. I'm almost 50. And so, you know, credit to her. She's made me feel very good. I can stomp myself. My 20-year-old self wouldn't be able to keep up at what I can do now by any stretch. And, that's not just tooting my own horn. That is just saying that I think there's a reason for that. And it's diet and the supplements that I take now that I wasn't taking back then. So, you know, that the supplement side of what we do is just stemmed from that. It's what she has me taking. And hey, I feel really good on this stuff. So let's try to get other people to maybe think about it. You know, the gut is something nobody wants to think about, but it's what do they call it? The second brain. It's very important to all things in your system. And I had a stint where I wasn't digesting food very well, and I was feeling bogged down and tired and brain fog and all that. My gut wasn't working. You know, and when that happens, you could eat the best of foods, and if it's not somehow getting that good quality food into your body, it's just going right through you. Yourself any favors. So every year I do we call it a gut restoration program, and it's a short-term program. It's got some subs attached to it, and it kind of resets the gut. And you know, I feel like it helps in the long run, and it helps with immunity. And my wife, you guys should get her on here one of these times and talk in depth. I try to stay in my lane. I can talk hunting, but when it comes to nerding out on the specifics of supplements, that's her field. That's what she deals with every day. She's a naturopathic physician in Bozeman, and is very popular, and that's her job. And
awesome.
She's helped people for years and years and years. So supplement line came from her, and to her suggestion, I take it, and a lot of people are benefiting from it. It just works. Kind of fit into what we do here.
Yeah, well, awesome. I'm glad you mentioned that specifically for hunters and outdoorsmen. You know, you can't say it enough. You hear a lot of stories about these old boys, especially up here in Alaska, and they've been carrying heavy packs for decades, oftentimes, and by the time they get 50, 55, 60 years old, they're pretty much done carrying that kind of heavy stuff. And it makes me wonder how many more of these guys in their 50s and some of them even in their 40s could be at a higher physical level if they would take care of their body a little bit better.
And that means when you get out of the field, you don't come back and start smashing cheeseburgers again from your local fast food place.
Right.
You know, your body is an engine, and you got to put the right kind of oil in your motor, or it's not going to work very well. And I've been, I know I was talking to you before we started recording, but I got a bunch of your supplements, and I've been tinkering with them and trying out different things. I take the immune health supplement every day, along with the turmeric as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong. Turmeric specifically targets joint recovery. Is that what that's?
It is. It's great for joints, joint health, and anti-inflammatory actions in the joint. So I take it combo with the CBD. I'm one that can take CBD. You know, I don't have, for folks that have jobs, working where they get urine tested and things like that, we always recommend people don't even do it. Even though there's no THC in it, you could take a broad spectrum CBD. There's 0 THC in it. And yet I would still be worried about a positive test, because the distinction between THC and CBD sometimes in these cheap urine tests isn't great. And I will fail it every time. Yet my wife passes hers every time. It's funny, we could take a broad spectrum for 2 weeks and go piss on a stick, and it shows me as hot and it shows her as negative. And it's just how our bodies metabolize it.
Interesting. Okay.
Believe it or not, but I have nothing to do. Look at me. You probably think I'm a stoner. Probably people think I look like a stoner at some point.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
But no, I don't even drink. I am not that exciting. I'm very boring when it comes to mind altering anything.
Yeah.
But I see the effects on the CBD front, or I wouldn't be taking it. And it's funny because anybody who might get tested, we just say don't do it.
Right.
An alternative would be to maybe go a little extra on the krill or a fish oil of your choice.
Okay.
And turmeric. Turmeric's one that I feel like everybody should take and can benefit from as far as the inflammation.
Yeah.
And for joint health, and hunters especially.
Yeah.
And so it's an easy one to take, in a capsule or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and do you guys have that gut restoration program available on your site? Is that something you guys do? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a 5-bottle kit basically that is on there. It's got a gut restore that comes with a digest that you take with every meal.
Yeah.
There's a detox that when you start taking it, you'll notice that you smell a little funny at times because it is toxin. It's kicking the toxins out, and you notice it.
Yeah.
And then a couple of bottles of the Immune Probi, which Dalton, you said you're taking too, which is a good everyday.
Yeah.
Keep your guts right.
Yeah.
Keep the good probiotics in your gut.
Yeah.
There. So that's something I take regularly as well.
And a big thing, I mean, that is a huge component. I didn't realize how big it was either. Cause I mean, back in the day, we would be out there running around, beating ourselves to death, and we'd come back to town and live on McDonald's and Monster energy drinks. Yeah. And both of those things are absolutely awful. And it's like, you can't put nothing back into your body and expect it to keep performing. Like you had just said, it's an engine. You got to keep it well oiled. And so I love that you guys are giving options like that for hunters and for people that might not have that inherent knowledge. I was laughing when you were talking about how your wife was starting to work with you and kind of get you to take the supplements, because my wife's going through a very similar struggle with trying to, when we first met, she was trying to get me back on track and get me functioning properly again. And so it's really awesome to have that be a staple there. The other thing I wanted to ask about, because this is probably the one I've gotten the most questions on since we started talking about you on the show, is the medical bag, the Backcountry medical kit. Give us a little bit of backstory on that and kind of what all's in it, what kind of situations that would be best for it. I think that's probably by far the one I've gotten the most questions about.
Yeah. And before I answer that, real quick, it took me till about year 38. Year 38 got me good. 38. It is like everything caught up. to me that year. And I remember, my 20s, you're invincible. You can do anything. You recover and everything is good. But it was year 38 when it really started a long hunting season just crushed me at the end. And all of a sudden, the stuff started falling apart. The inflammation was intense.
Yeah.
And that's when there was a switch for me. And it's like, man, I can't do this every year. I got to change something. So, there's cutting out sugars and things like that. You don't have to go crazy on that stuff. But man, like Dalton, you said food is absolute fuel. It's the fuel that you put in. If you're just up there pounding Snicker bars, you're going to be a little rice burner. You're going to burn out up there. Versus like, I'd rather go like my Dodge Cummins style and just, good fuel, strong, maintain 10-day hunts, feeling good on day 10 is day one. Versus just going up there and petering out after a few days. So
absolutely.
It's very important. It's easy to get conned into the sweets and the tasties. And we don't cut all that stuff out, but we try to limit it so that we're not putting in as many inflammatory foods, sugar especially, so that doesn't affect our body so much. The swelling and the joint inflammation. That's generally a result of, a lot of it is a result of the food that you're taking in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, so as far as the medical kit, I don't know about you guys, but I started off with about as weak of a medical kit as possible. And I've finally come around to packing more. I got away with it years and years and years, just not needing much. It was adequate, little wrap, little gauze, couple of bandages, just very basic. Now we've been doing these summits for the last few years and 5 years now. And we've got a backcountry medical expert that comes in, Corey Tingelstad. He comes in every year and he does these really good presentations about things that could happen to you and ways to deal with them. And it's a great discussion. There's always a lot of questions in that. Hopefully nobody ever needs to use that knowledge, but he really opened my eyes and got me taking a few more things. And so with his help, he, we collaborated on this thing and we talked about putting together a more fitting backcountry medical bag that I would actually pack with me. The 2-3 pounders that were out there is great, but they'll stay at my truck. They're not going to come with me in my backpack.
Right.
And so we tried to minimalize this as best we could while still keeping everything in there that would get you out of most situations, right? Everything from the tourniquet to the lightweight splint to any bandages and wraps that you would potentially need. And so we came up with this kit, and it was 14 ounces and something I'm willing to pack. And I feel like I've upgraded a lot since what I used to do. I used to just pray that nothing would happen.
Right.
Realistically,
something's going to happen at some point.
And the thing I like about yours so much is that it's really the only one of its kind online that I've found. There's that's lightweight, that has the right things in it for the right situations. Because like you said, there are other ones out there that are 2-3 pounds. They're these massive Kevlar bags basically that are just way too bulky, way too heavy.
Yeah.
And then in a lot of cases, a lot of people are just going down to the local Sportsman's or Cabela's and buying whatever they have down there that's labeled trauma on the front of it.
Yeah.
And their version of trauma has 31 inch by 3 inch Band-Aids in it, which you'll never use that many Band-Aids on a hunt.
Right.
But it doesn't have a tourniquet. It doesn't have gauze. It might have gauze, but it's the little 3 by 3 inch piece. And I love that you guys put together something that's all encompassing, I should say, for just about any situation you can run into.
Right.
Yeah, and we've tweaked it to, those little kit sacks that we move a lot. We changed a couple of the kit sacks to be a much more stretchy material for guys, for say maybe they want to add some things, to their med kit.
Yeah.
I know I have to add, I'm allergic to bees, so I got to carry some epinephrine with me with some needles.
Yeah.
In case something happens. So there's a few things that you'll want to add specific to knowing your body. And so with the real stretchy kit sack that we have, this red kit sack that we have the medical bags in, medical kits, there's so much stretch in that bag. You can add anything that you need to if you need something else aside from what's already in it. But yeah, it's simple, but I feel like it's very effective and it covers everything that we're probably going to go through.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they did a really good video presentation on YouTube about that too.
Yeah,
that I watched through. It really explains each individual piece of it. So definitely go check that out, guys.
Yeah, Corey's a great guy. He comes to our events every year. Him and his wife, and they help out. And his presentations are pretty cool. He walks people through, all these scenarios, and sometimes my daughter doesn't want to hang in on those presentations. It gets a little gory with some of the photos he shows. But he, the first time he showed up to our event, he was getting out all this chicken. Like, he asked me to give him a bunch of chicken, just cheap chicken bodies. And so my wife shows up, and Corey's out there, like, he's got this raw chicken, and he's out there in the driveway. He's like scraping it in the dirt, and like, man, what is he seasoning this chicken with? Why is it getting rubbed in the dirt? Where's he going with this? Well, he was doing that for wound care for somebody that, drives a knee or elbow into some grit. And so he explains, like, how to clean it out, proper way to clean it out, pick the grit and all that stuff.
That's a great
But he uses chickens. And so the kids love this part. Like, when we get kids to these events, they love the cleaning of the chickens for wound care. It's pretty fun. But he does a great job at explaining all these things in that video.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's pretty much the purpose of the needle and the syringe in the kit, correct? It's for wound cleaning. It's for getting sterile water,
irrigation,
in the wound and then picking out, pine needles and things, anything you might get in there.
Yes.
Larger.
Yeah. There's a small lightweight pair of tweezers in there for pick and grit. And then there's that, you're right, there's the needle for irrigation. Try to push some of that out that you can't necessarily pick out. So Yep. It's all in there.
Gotcha. Well, that's pretty cool. So speaking of the Backcountry medical kit, first aid is going to be especially important when you're by yourself. So let's talk about solo hunting. That was a really good segue.
Really
there,
good.
I'm going to hang
impressed. That was a great segue, man.
I tip my hat to you,
I'm going to hang my hat on that segue for a while now.
Yeah, I've been wondering for a while now if every time you say, man, that's a great segue, if it's still a good segue.
Well, this is episode 23, so yeah, I would say so. We're gonna find more great segues as we go, and every time it's just gonna be great.
So, not to degrade the segue, so let's keep on topic here. So solo hunting, Mr. Ryan Lampers is really, really well known in the outdoor industry, at least that I've seen. Probably the one most well-recognized facts about Ryan Lampers is the fact that he loves to hunt solo. So talk to us about how you got into solo hunting, what drove you to do that. After you were out with Dallas Blood and he kind of showed you the ropes on elk hunting, talk to us about your evolution of your personal hunting experiences after that. And did you have a series of events with hunting partners where you had differences and that made you want to go solo, or if it was just like a deep ingrained thing from childhood that I just love being out there alone? So kind of take off into the solo hunting world for a minute here.
Yeah, I think, let's be honest. I won't sugarcoat this, but probably the biggest factor of why I did so many solo hunts is, kind of an introvert and not a lot of friends. Let's just say that. In the younger days, I had a small, tight group of friends, and so, my cousin, who basically is kind of like a brother to me, we grew up together. We did a lot, so he was my number one hunting partner that would go with me often. Now, when we ran the business together, it was him and I. And he, the good guy that he is, my buddy Joe, he's more into fishing. He loves big game hunting and such, but he gave me a lot of time as a business partner to go do the hunts that I wanted to do. And we would complement each other. I'd try to get him as much time as possible, but he would also get me as much time as possible. And the way it worked out, when he was gone, I would run the business, vice versa. And when we could sync those times, the unbusy season, then we'd both do these really cool trips together. But, a lot of the solo hunts were a result of that. It was just trying to pre-plan with somebody else was difficult. And I'm very good by myself. I can handle myself just fine. And I'm okay and comfortable being just me and not other folks. So, introverts are usually pretty comfortable with themselves. And that's what I was in the beginning. So I did a crud ton of hunts. And, when you first start out doing it in the early days, you do a couple nights overnights by yourself, and then you kind of build it up from there. And, I could go out now and spend 3 weeks up there and be perfectly comfortable without any human connection whatsoever. Minus checking in with my kids and my wife through an inReach. And so, I did a lot of solo hunts back in the day, growing up in Washington, going into extremely remote places and, having the challenges of getting an animal out in a timely fashion by yourself, without help, without stock, and so I got really good at that. And, the last few years, because of, Brian Call inviting himself to come on a hunt with me, and forcing his way into our controlled group there. Now it seems like the guy is always there on all my hunts. And so we hunt really well together. But there's very few people that I've hunted with that I really enjoy hunting with, that give their all and they don't quit. And I think more importantly is, you can be around them and they don't bug the crud out of you, and they can handle themselves is very, very important. If you have some emergency back there, are you with someone that can handle it?
Right.
Or are you with that guy that is very passive and probably is going to freeze up and not control the situation? I have very few people I hunt with, and I want to hunt with those guys that I will trust with my life.
Right.
And, in saying that, we're talking about solo hunting. So oftentimes, I find myself in places where you just got to be a little extra careful. You're watching every step that you take a little bit closer when you're back there by yourself. You take precautions. I know I'm much more precautious when I am by myself. Everything's on me. The mistakes I made could potentially be life or death. And so I'm very meticulous about the things that I need, that I have with me as I walk away from my potential base camp that day. I'm not going to walk away from my base camp without the items that will carry me through the night.
Right.
If I'm with another gentleman, maybe that's not the case. If I hurt myself, he could probably get a fire going, help that situation. But when I'm by myself, there's definitely things that I make sure I take with me, that if I got to stay the night on the mountain, there's no issues there. But these days I'm actually, I'd say handful, find myself with a partner or two on a lot of these trips, and it's great. We've definitely weeded through some that are not as pleasurable to hunt with, but the group that I hunt with now, the Brian Calls and the Mark Livisays and those type guys, they're able to handle themselves. They're fun to be around. Brian is Dalton, you and I were talking the other day, like don't get in a conversation with Brian Call unless you got 2.5 hours to carve out of your day. So he's a guy that will carry the conversation in the teepee at night while I sit there and listen. So man, there's always some entertainment there, and
sure.
And so he'll go on regarding the book that he heard. He'll tell you he read it, but he really heard it on Audible. I think he feels like it makes him seem smarter if he says he read it. He didn't read it. He heard it. So no, it's we do really well together because I'm not that guy. I don't keep the conversation going. I'm pretty quiet, and then he does. And very similar to my cousin who I used to hunt with, Joe. Great storyteller. Always had stuff to talk about, and I mix well with those people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Hey guys, if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you've likely heard Dalton and I go back and forth about bullet construction and how I like rapid expanding bonded core bullets that leave massive wound channels. I've also stated I would never use a monolithic bullet. Well, I'm here to tell you about the company that finally changed my mind. Hammer Bullets produces what I would consider the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are designed so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, the front half of the bullet explodes, shedding its petals and imparting massive damage to the vital areas while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration, effectively closing the gap between lead core and monolithic construction. The guys at Hammer designed these bullets with 100% focus on how they perform once they reach their destination. But don't let that fool you. These bullets have amazing VCs and have specialized pressure grooves built in for amazing inherent accuracy. They have a minimum velocity rating of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots but have no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity rounds like the Weatherby 3378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. They've also recently partnered with Weatherby to provide factory ammunition for a multitude of cartridges. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com to buy yours today and drop the hammer on your next adventure.
So just on the idea of solo hunting here, our last episode that will have aired before we air this one, we talked a lot about bears and a lot about spring bear baiting up here because we are rapidly approaching the time of great joy and disappointment of bear baiting because it can go either way. But
it can.
Just leading into bear baiting, we got into a lot of discussions about bear behavior. We didn't even get to touch on picking a spot and how to set up a bait and all that jazz. We just parked. The majority of that episode was about behavior of bears. Yeah. And you, especially you and Brian, have put out a lot of content to do with bear hunting over the last few years. And we all really like that you guys put a heavy focus on predator management. In the film that you guys put out a couple of years ago, I actually I had run out of things new to watch last week, and I pulled up the old video with you guys hunting with Adam Weatherby a couple of years ago when you took that wolf on that spring black bear hunt. Yeah, so the willingness to take your valuable time and go shoot animals like bears and wolves that a lot of folks don't put as very important, if you will, to take that valuable time off of work and take time out of your schedule and you're away from your family and you're still going through all that effort to go deep into the backcountry and just to take bears, and that's how a lot of folks look at that. That they don't see bears as a very desirable species to hunt. Now, you guys and us all alike, we all eat bear meat. We love the fat from the bears. We keep the hides and the skulls. That's all a part of it for us. But so talk about particularly with you with solo hunting. A lot of folks up here in Alaska, they know one story about bears and being by yourself, and that's Timothy Treadwell with Grizzly Man. And they've seen the Hollywood documentary about it. They've watched the National Geographic type videos, and everybody's always referencing Grizzly Man and how he got killed and eaten and his girlfriend with him. And that's what is popularized is, always go with a partner if you can when you're in bear country. Now, as we mentioned in that previous episode, having a competent partner does greatly reduce your risk of a potentially deadly encounter. But it's also very possible, and all of us here routinely go to our bear baits by ourselves because we have too many of them for us to all be together all the time to go to them. It would be impossible. Yeah. There aren't enough hours in the weeks that we have available to bear bait for all of us to at least go 2 apiece to every bear bait we have. It just wouldn't be possible. So we inadvertently end up being alone at these bear baits, which obviously we're trying to get bears there. So we have bear encounters, and none of us are afraid of that. But talk specifically about mountain trips where you've gone out and maybe had some encounters and your mindset going into that, and not being afraid of it, but how you deal with that in your own head, being by yourself.
Yeah, no, good question. I feel like I can't answer it without addressing the Timothy Treadwell thing. I mean, can we agree that guy was an idiot? Can we just say he's an idiot?
I was going to go on a whole spiel about that.
He was a nut job. Yeah, he was a nut job.
Well, and the thing I wanted to point out,
anyone who tries to pet bears and live right next to bears and act as if humanize them in a way, and act as if they're not going to be a threat in any way, you're just asking for it.
Well, and the thing with him is he put himself in a really bad situation. And he was literally camped on the bear trail.
Oh, yeah.
And when the bear came down the trail in the middle of the night, he said he was going to go talk to it or something like that. And he walked out of his tent without no firearm, no bear spray, no backup, no nothing.
Yeah.
And so the funny part about that, though, is when you watch his video series, he did successfully live among those bears for quite some time.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's kind of that contrast when you watch that video where, to an extent, as careless as he was being, he still didn't have a negative encounter until
the end.
And it was just a matter of statistics at that point. And you put yourself in a dangerous situation enough times, eventually you're going to get bit.
I was going to mention one more thing, and I don't like to speak ill of the deceased, and we're not trying to just criticize people for their mistakes. He had some strange mental issues, if I can put it that way.
Let's criticize his methods, like his.
As far as his mental approach to what bears were.
Yeah,
he was kind of strange, and I know somebody that knows relatives of his, and everybody that knew him said that he was just kind of a strange guy, socially speaking. Like off camera, he was real awkward with people. He had just a terrible past in his life, and I think he felt that the only place he really felt at home was out there with animals. And while we all love being out there amongst the animal kingdom, if I can put it that way, we know not to humanize animals, because at the end of the day, that's a predator. That is the apex of predators in Alaska and really of the North American continent. And he was trying to turn bears into something that they are very much not. And also the time of year that he was out there.
Yeah.
When him and his girlfriend got killed, they were out there late fall. The bears were searching for the last bit of food. A lot of the bears were starting to move out of that area. The bear that actually attacked them, he had bad encounters with before. And he knew which bear that was. And I'm not trying to be too graphic here, but there was some chilling audio that got released from that encounter. His camera was recording.
So
with the film lens, with the lens cap on in the tent when this happened.
So the way it went down was he went out to approach the bear. His girlfriend was in the tent with the camera, and at some point, I don't think it was intentional, it got turned on with, like you said, it was either in the bag or the camera lens was on, but you got the audio. It was almost 5 minutes of screaming and attacking and everything.
Terrible.
Think about doing squats for 5 minutes straight. Think about doing push-ups for 5 minutes straight. 5 minutes feels like a long time.
Yeah.
That was a very horrible thing that happened to them.
Yeah.
But again, it kind of falls back to, you put yourself in that situation enough times without the proper protection, without the proper mindset, without the proper preparations, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared for dealing with that situation when you're put in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I like looking at that is because, and we kind of talked about this in our last episode as well, where a lot of people get this version of grizzlies and bears in general, where they kind of equate them with, I think the term I used back then was like the great white shark.
Yeah.
Everybody sees Jaws and they think, oh, all great white sharks are Jaws. Well, people think all grizzly bears and all brown bears are these snarling, nasty, bloodthirsty creatures.
Yeah.
And having that mentality is not good either. Having that mentality going into it is going to get you almost in more trouble.
Yeah.
Because then you're expecting it and you're escalating a situation that otherwise wouldn't.
Right.
One thing I found interesting watching his film was that there were times he'd be in the salmon stream. There was one time it was kind of to talk about his mentality. He was actually rearranging rocks in a stream so the fish could get through better, thinking he was helping nature rather than encroaching on nature. And he's literally there like moving rocks and taking fish that couldn't get around these rock structures and moving them over to help them get down the river. And there's bears walking up from behind him, coming to fish the streams.
Oh boy.
And he had no negative encounter in that instance.
Wow.
It was not a situation where the bear found him threatening and chose to attack.
Yeah.
And so just because you're in the backcountry, just because you're among the bears doesn't mean they're necessarily interested in you.
Right.
And so that's kind of where, you, with your mentality going into it solo, how do you kind of work through that in your head, knowing there's a possibility of both ends of the spectrum there, but kind of keeping yourself in the middle?
Yeah, I think where Treadwell just lost me was his fear of bears was gone. Like you have to have, you don't want to say like I'm scared of bears, but there better be a healthy fear somewhat, which will just make you make better decisions as far as where you place yourself, or like where you put your tent, or the actions that you take around bears. You could survive with bears for long periods of time. But that time's going to run out if you have no fear of bears,
right?
And you feel like they're just one of your buddies,
right?
That's going to go away at some point. No, I spent all those years up in Alaska. We did a lot of fly outs. Yeah, we always had a little 18-inch sawed off on our back, which helped. But I was in charge of bringing 4 or 5 guys out on these little fly out rivers where choked with sockeye, right? So bear grass is tall. Small creeks, 10 to 15 feet across, many of them, and nothing but bear scat and bear trails and rotting stink of rotting flesh everywhere, that time of year. And it's not like we were scared, but you better take actions that are going to, improve your success at coming out alive in some of those places. You take a few wrong steps and things can go south real fast. So I think just a healthy respect without just being totally scared and not going into places. We're not going to avoid places because there's grizzly bears down here.
Right.
Every year we get guys nicked up. Usually it starts about right now when guys are starting out their shed hunt. Very close to my place here, we have guys get nicked up every year from grizzlies. And it's just a matter of, these bears are a little bit more snarly, I feel like, than even a lot of those Alaskan bears. These bears don't get shot at, right?
They are.
They don't have a healthy fear of us.
Right.
So hopefully that'll change someday. But as it stands right now, I mean, we hunt in heavy grizz country at times. And we have high populations of black bears. And usually we're chasing them in the spring, we're chasing them in the fall, and often we'll see more grizz than we see black bears in some of the places that we hunt nowadays.
Yeah.
But we always try to do our best. Placement of campsite is a big one for us. Down here, we notice a lot of these grizzlies love the lower meadows. They love trails. They absolutely thrive on trails. They see a trail, they're going to walk it.
Yep.
And then big grassy meadows in the springtime. We're not going to put ourselves in places where those grizz frequent more than other places. We're going to find those other places that are a little less frequented. And that's just one thing you can do. And it's not that difficult because you'll notice oftentimes on these spring trips that we do, we're seeing them in the exact same type places.
Right.
So you recognize it, mental note, that's the type place we don't want to put campsite.
Yeah.
So we do try to take note of that and be careful with that. And like you said, I think when we hunt in Grizz country, oftentimes we're with buddies. I've done it with buddies, without buddies. You're always extra heightened when you're solo in Grizz country.
Yeah.
You're just naturally going to be, but we try not to avoid these type places because there's high numbers of bears.
Yeah.
We want to be in those type places anyway to hunt black bears. So, not sure where I was going with that, but as far as like the solo stuff, I've had experiences with bears in the past. I had an elk hunt that kind of took a turn for me one time. I was on a bow hunt. I had stuck this really nice 6-point bull here in Montana, and I no sooner stuck it, and it was heavily snowed. It was an October season. We got an early snow that year, and I walked up just to check to see my arrow and whatever, and I kind of just went down the bloody tracks a little ways, just kind of get a picture of what was going on. And it's like there was a bear right next to the bull when I shot him, because no sooner did I shoot that thing, and I got on my elk's tracks within probably 10 minutes, and a bear had already cut that bull's tracks, the blood trail, and he started tracking that elk. And so my thought is, well, dang it, he hopefully goes down fast. But now I'm alone, and I have my bow, and I've got a can of bear spray, and that's all I had at that time.
Yeah.
And what happened was I went in very cautious, and I came to this grisly scene of blood everywhere. And when there's snow, it makes it look worse.
Yeah.
Like a total murder scene going on here. And obviously what happened was that bear had caught up to that bull, and the bull, it was a death punch. That bull was having a hard time standing up, but that bear got on it, and it got that bull's adrenaline going, and they went round and round and nose to nose, it looked like, for a little bit. And then I looked over about 40 yards from me. That bull's got his head down. He's sick. And that bear is right off the tip of his nose. And so I've got my bear spray in one hand, and I got my bow in the other. I set the spray down. I had my arrow knocked, and I decided to go ahead and put another arrow in that bull. That bull to go down. Maybe I should have focused it on the bear on that first shot, because I put another arrow in that bull, and the bear cut to the right, saw me, and did a dead sprint right at me. And immediately after I, pulled through that shot, I reached down, grabbed the spray, get it up, and I sprayed the crud out of that bear. And it turned him. He went right through that cloud and turned him, and he ran off.
Oh boy.
And I didn't have a handgun on me at that time on that particular hunt. Didn't. That was probably a number one mistake. But the spray did its job that day, and it worked. And it wasn't even like it was a big bear. It was like a medium type bear. But he had the taste of blood, and he really wanted that elk. Yeah. And the nerves after that, I've got this dead bull right in front of me, and I've got a bear that's, obviously want this bull. Man, every gray jay, every chipmunk that was in a tree within 100 yards was like getting me jumped up and nervous. But we just continue to hunt in those places. Try to be smart about it. But
was that a black bear or a grizzly bear, Ryan?
That was a black bear. That was just a black bear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But what do you do when you're on an extended hunt back there? What would you say are like your top? Because I know you said you had talked about placement of your camp, and you're making sure you're not in a high traffic area. But what are some things you do to mitigate, say, scent from when you're cooking?
Yeah.
If you got your MSR stove out there, or you've got some kind of meal that you're prepping, what's your go-to methods for storing that and for kind of mitigating the scent, leading them back to your camp, even if you are in kind of a low traffic area?
Yeah, it's just the classic things. When I'm by myself, I hang my food high, well away from my camp. Obviously, it's a little bit of a jaunt to get there every morning to get your breakfast. everything, toothpaste to all meals and snacks and everything smelly like that goes in that bag and gets hung. And then when I'm by myself, I do not get lazy about cooking in camp.
Yeah.
We just cook, away from camp and then come back to camp to sleep, basically. We get a little lazy when we're with groups of, say, 4 guys. We'll sit around and we'll have, we'll cook right there by the fire or whatever and tend to eat. But obviously with 4 guys, I'm much more comfortable. Generally, the likelihood of a bear attack with 4 guys is very, very, very slim.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not to say that it couldn't happen, but it's not very likely.
I think there was a statistic one time that I read that 95% of bear attacks happen on groups of 3 or less. I think, or 3 was the number that 3 and up is when you get into that safe zone.
Yeah.
In a group.
That's really interesting.
Correct. Yeah. Solo is the number one where.
Right.
You get nicked up pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, my buddy Remington and I, we were out hunting together fall bears, and we were chasing grizzly bears, black bears in an area that we could shoot either or. We were targeting grizzly bears, and it was really a spur of the moment trip. I didn't even bring a tent. I was driving down to where he lives. We were going to hunt in the south central part of the state, and there's a lot of bears down there in the alpine type country, up in the mountains. Kind of up in sheep country, really. And I drove down there, stayed the night at his place, and we were just going to double up on his 4-wheeler. I didn't even bring my 4-wheeler at the time. We weren't even planning on going hunting until I was about 3 hours out of Fairbanks. And then he called me and he said, "Hey, why don't you just, if you have a rifle and your gear, why don't we just ride in here for a day and just spend the one night and just try to kill a bear or something? They're out and they're still out." And so we went in there, and he grabbed what he thought was a big tarp for us to sleep under for the night, and we grabbed a couple of sleeping bags. I didn't even bring one, and this is one of the rare occasions where I am not prepared. Usually I've got everything in the kitchen sink, and if I don't need it, then it stays at the truck if that needs to be. But if I'm driving out of town, I'm bringing everything I might need and most of the stuff that I probably won't, but at least I have it with me, right? But anyway, we got down there, we rode in together, big river crossings, and got into this spot real late in the evening. And we pulled out what we thought was this nice big tarp to kind of pitch for like an A-frame tent. It wasn't supposed to rain that night. It was starting to sprinkle a little bit. And we pulled out what we thought was our tarp that we were going to use for a tent. And it was a rain poncho. And he had grabbed the wrong bag. It was in the same bag as their other big tarp was in the garage at the time. And so now we're hours and hours away from the truck. We're in the middle of nowhere, and we're on a bear trail. And it was the only spot that we could find to camp. There was thick brush all around, and there were bear tracks after bear tracks right on this main trail. And this area is heavy with grizzly bears, heavy. And there were fresh tracks everywhere. The week before, he'd been riding in there on his 4-wheeler and bumped a grizzly bear on the trail that ran next to him just inside the brush for like 20 yards. Just looking at him, just keeping up with him, looking at him. And so anyway, so now we have this rain poncho. There's very little protection from the elements. So we stretched out our sleeping bags and slept that night side by side under this tiny little rain poncho with the hole in the middle of it that we had to fold over to try not to get wet. That was one of the more uncomfortable nights I ever spent. But it was because right on a trail, and we knew that the bears frequented that trail every day. And like you mentioned, grizzly bears just love trails. If there's a trail there and it's in grizz country, you're going to have grizzly bears on that trail at some point. Honestly, if you were just going to still hunt without bait, you just find a good trail that has a bunch of tracks on it, you're eventually going to see one.
Yeah.
That's just how they operate. Black bears, I don't know why, but they tend to stay off the trails a little bit more and just kind of slither through the thick stuff. They're more of a forest ghost.
Probably has a lot to do with grizzlies.
I was just going to say
it probably has a lot to do with the grizzlies.
Yeah,
they want to stay off those trails and avoid a run in with a grizzly. But to your point though, picking safe camp spots. I slept that night with my handgun on my chest, John Wayne style, and I might have slept 3 hours that night because you never know. It's just a 4-wheeler sitting there in the dark. It was raining. There was a little bit of cover noise. We weren't going to be kicking up very much scent because it was raining and, tracks everywhere. But that was a situation where even both of us with a lot of experience with bears, both of us thought, if we're going to have a bad encounter, it's going to be right now in the dark. And so I slept with my headlamp on my head thinking, at any moment there's going to be a nose that comes out underneath this poncho looking at us, soft tacos wrapped up underneath this tarp. And anyway though, but yeah, picking a good camp spot and trying to stay off those bear trails is huge.
You just try to give them space. And right. Like you said, Dalton, the trails are their space. We give them the trails if we can do that when it comes to the camping.
Right.
But you're right. Black bears, even in areas down here where there's not much of a mix, we've got ranges that are void of grizzly bears. There's very few of them now, but there's a few.
Yeah.
And we still find those black bears don't tend to use trails like a grizzly.
Yeah.
Grizzlies just like those paths on a trail.
Yeah.
They love meadows and bottoms and places. And often we'll find the black bears more high on the hill and more remote. It feels like.
Yeah.
Right. But there's exceptions. Obviously, they love campgrounds as well and people's, trash. But generally when we're hunting, we're finding the black bears a little higher, much higher on the hill.
Yeah.
If you want to see G bears, you look towards the bottoms.
Yeah.
A lot of the places.
Well, and I found that to be true up here, with the exception of early spring and late fall, where they're working up the hills trying to look for a hole to sleep in for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
That's when you'll see them way up on the tops a lot more often. If it's summertime and even early fall, even into September, they're in those bottoms. And I part of my theory is that's where all the ungulates hang out, and grizzly bears are very predatory on ungulate species. And if they're going to catch a caribou or a moose in an opening, that's where it's going to happen, because those caribou and moose aren't generally going to be up on those ridge tops as much. Not never, but they're going to have a higher chance of catching some food down low in those meadows type areas.
Sure. And when I talked about that story, that was a long time ago, but I tried to get away with just a can of spray. There was times I'd just take a chest rig. And now when we're going into these real heavily dense, black bear plus grizz areas, I'm taking both. I usually always have, my pistol on my chest, and then I've always got a can on my hip belt of spray as well, just kind of a backup. But I do carry both now. I'm not as big of a weight pansy as I used to be. So
and that's actually a really good point to make there, because a lot of people, when you start getting into these discussions, especially in the comment sections on social media and stuff like that, you get this so back and forth of the people that are the only spray people, and then the people that are the only handgun people. Oh, my bear spray is 44 caliber. And honestly, carrying both gives you the best chance for coming out on top in that situation.
Yeah.
Not only because if the bear doesn't react to the spray the way you want, you have a nice backup for that situation, but you also don't want to DLP every single bear you're going to run into.
No.
And DLP is an Alaskan term. I don't know. It might be far out from Alaska, but it's defense of life and property.
Right.
And it's a lot of paperwork you got to do if you kill something you're not supposed to out of season, or a version of that animal you're not supposed to kill, be it a sow with cubs or something.
Right.
And you don't want to always have to take that lethal approach
right
to sorting out every situation. In a lot of cases, like what you said, even with a bleeding animal there that it wanted to eat, a cloud of spray worked and it ran off.
yeah
And so you can get out of these situations without having to DLP an animal, but it's nice to have that backup if the spray doesn't work, and maybe that bear just likes spicy Mexican food. I don't know. But so but
you don't want to burn up all your mulligans in one season by killing a bunch of bears that, well, officer, he was charging me. All right. Well, this is what you said the last 2 times, and
exactly.
Maybe we're seeing a recurring pattern here. But well, let's.
I think it's important just to give, how we treat grizzlies down here is we try to give them a wide berth. Like if we see one, we try to just, very simple cliche to say, it's just give them their space.
Yep.
And try to avoid them, and don't Timothy Treadwell it and act as if they're no threat at all.
I was going to say my boss came up with a saying that I just thought was hilarious. He had a T-shirt idea, and it's a little bit poignant, but he said that we should have an outline of a bear, and it should say tread lightly but don't tread well. That might be something that we work on down the road someday. But I was going to say
that's a Northern Hunter. That's your guys' first T-shirt.
I was going to say I think we should wrap up the bear discussion with one more story. I know we've gone a little bit long on this particular topic, but a couple of years ago, you guys put out a film. I think it might have even been titled Black Bear Hunting in Grizz Country, something to that effect, where you guys had llamas, and you ended up in camp one day and you had a real testy encounter with a grizzly bear invading your guys' camp. So kind of give us that situation and how you dealt with it, and then we'll move on from the bear topic. But I really want you to touch on that story before we move on.
Yeah, that was a hot year for bears. We had multiple things go that year,
and you guys had some big ones around that year too. There were a lot of grizzlies.
Giants,
huge grizzly
giant bears. Land sharks. I mean, they were everywhere. We had so that experience. I had taken a bear the day prior, I believe, and we had packed it down. And my buddy Mark and Brian. Brian was with me when I took my bear. It was a bear that I'd been going for. Beautiful bright red coat on this thing, and I tried to get him the year prior, and it didn't quite work out. We had a crazy call-in scenario that it's funny. I'll just tell this story real quick. But so we had a video where this was the year prior to the grizzly and the llama scenario.
Okay.
And I was focused on a bear down ridge. It was a beautiful chocolate. Really trying to decide whether I wanted to fill my tag on this bear. Good looking bear. But we had been up there. We climbed this mountain, specifically targeting this big old red bear we called Red Lightning. It was just big old thing. Beautiful bear. And the bear eluded us somehow, some way. We had another sighting while we were up tight and close, just didn't get the shot. And then we ended up circling around this basin, and we had pretty much convinced ourselves that Red was not in the basin that we were looking in. We figured he must have slipped out. Classic, with bears. You think they're not there, but they probably are right in front of you. and we had worked around, and we picked up that chocolate down mid basin, and I was prone and looking and trying to size up this bear. Brian's holding the camera. And the bear wasn't giving me a good look, so I started screaming on this distress call, a fawn distress call. And I'm still focused on this chocolate, and Brian's holding the camera with his right hand trying to get me, and then the long lens is on the bear. And I hear a stick break with my ear protection in, and I look up. I decided I wasn't going to take that chocolate, but I look up, and now closing in at 40 yards, down to 30 yards, is this big old jet black bear that we didn't even know existed in the basin. And he is closing fast to my predator calls. And so I stand up and just offhand, and I dump this thing right there at 30 yards. Good to go. Walked away thinking, wow, that bear came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the the red bear, who knows where that thing went? That thing just ducked us. And it wasn't until we got back home and we realized, so Brian started working on some edits and he was looking at the camera. He was just kind of holding in my direction.
Yeah.
And what he quickly noticed was when I started wailing on that call, 2 bears came ripping in. First, the red one came ripping in that we never saw until we looked back at the footage. It came in the exact same footsteps, basically, as that jet black that I shot at 30 yards. We didn't even see the red come in because we were so focused on the chocolate. We had 3 bears right in front of us.
Yeah.
So focused on the chocolate at the time. And I'm screaming on this thing and red comes through, probably walked right behind us. We never heard it, saw it until later, weeks later, when the footage started, getting looked at. Well, the following year we went in there, and long story short, we ended up killing red. I found him again and I got him, same mountain. He hadn't moved far from the year prior, early in spring. And so Brian and I, we packed my bear down and he's going to meet up with Livesay, and I'm going to now stand guard, be llama babysitter to the group. And I'm going to do a bunch of cleanup. And so I'm down there and washing clothes basically in the creek. I got all my meat. I'm kind of shuffling from shade to shade to shade. It was an old burn and we didn't have a whole lot of shade, 360 shade. And there was a point where I was just kind of hanging by camp, and the llamas, if you've ever heard a llama like unsure of what he sees, they make this crazy, like it's a bark, but it's alien. It's just a weird noise. Like, can't explain it. This weird barking, consistent thing, and it's like a nervous chatter. So I looked down creek a little ways, and here comes this big old grizz. And kept coming. Well, the big old saw the llamas, and he was really curious, or she was really curious. It was a sow. And she gets closer and closer, and her head is up, and she's looking like, I'm going to go check this out. Well, llamas are standing right next to me. I got my handgun out, and fortunately there was a creek right between us, so I had a little bit of time. If she did decide to charge in, but she was very curious and she did not want to leave. So she came in very close, but I still had that creek between us. And I eventually got to the point where I put a warning shot out and didn't phase her. And then I put another one, and that one got her going, and she ended up taking off. And those llamas just kept barking the entire time. They're great at letting you know that there's a bear in the area.
Yeah.
Or a cat in the area, or even a coyote or elk or anything. They just pick everything up that you may not see. And it was the following day that I went to do some glassing that a giant boar came in, and he got to within 20 yards of me. I was on one side of a tree spotting up on this hill in the direction of where Brian and Mark were. And this giant land shark comes in behind me, and I heard it before I saw it. I heard it and spun around, and that big old thing was just standing right there. The wind was right. He didn't know I was there. It was coming towards me, and that thing fed right on past, and he was so close at that 20-yard range that all I could do was just not move at that time. Last thing I wanted to do was jump up and spook him at when he's that tight to me. So I kept my back tight against that tree and didn't move a muscle. And he just eventually kind of walked on by as he's like kicking rocks out and looking for grubs. And he worked right on by me. That situation was way scarier because it was one of those deals where I just was in the wrong spot at the wrong time. And he snuck right in, and I, fortunately I heard him. If I would have just stood up in that moment and hadn't heard something behind me, pretty good chance he would have been caught off guard and done something about it, because I was by myself. But that situation was much scarier. I still would have got some shots in with the handgun on my chest, but it doesn't feel like much when you've got a massive boar. I mean, this was one of the bigger boars that we'd ever seen in the lower 48 at that range.
Yeah. Now I think I know which bear you're talking about. Did you guys get some film of that one out feeding in that field?
Yep.
Yeah, that bear was
very dark color.
Just a monster grizzly bear.
Giant,
monstrous. Right? Yeah, you're right though. Handguns, you might as well be shooting a slingshot. It feels like. Obviously, it's better than that, but that's an intimidating scene when you've got a grizzly bear, and that's why we preach stay close to your rifle, because nothing can replace the power of a rifle cartridge when compared to a handgun. A handgun, you're getting 1,200 feet a second max with like a 10 millimeter or something like that, and you're shooting. Sure, some guys love to argue the fact that it's a nice big bullet that'll drive deep, but you're not causing the damage that you have with a high velocity rifle cartridge. And I know you guys have had real good luck in recent years now with that 338 Weatherby RPM. That gives you a lot of assurance for stopping power on these mountain hunts, and a nice lightweight gun. But you've got plenty of poop to deal with a cantankerous bear at close range.
Dalton, what you started talking about with the 338, there's almost no reason not to carry it now. That thing is so lightweight, and it's got that nice short 18-inch barrel.
Yeah.
If you went with the stainless barrel on it.
Yeah, I did.
It's a compact gun. It's not 10, 12 pounds, it's very manageable. So that, in that scenario, I would have been absolutely better off to have that 338 leaning up against the tree with me, that day than just a handgun in front of me. So,
sure. And you brought that, kind of speaking about the 338, you had brought that up on a couple of hunts in Alaska now, haven't you? Or and gotten it some time up here in the north?
Last year. Yeah. Just last year was the maiden voyage for up there in Alaska with the 338. So we tested it pretty heavily on that trip and got a lot of use out of it up there. We had a great time. We took a lot of animals.
You guys cleaned house, man.
We loaded those boats as full as we could load them. Yeah. Great. I think we ended up with about 10 animals.
Yeah.
And that was 2 moose and 8 caribou.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So
it's
a lot.
How many times have you been up here to Alaska now, do you think? I mean, just for hunting trips. I mean, both production and just in your personal life.
So last year is the first year that I had been back up to Alaska in a long time.
Really?
It's kind of the rebirth for me coming back to Alaska, and I don't see me not going to Alaska for a number of years.
There you go.
That's great.
I cut it out for a long time, a couple of decades there, but now I'm fully immersed and I've got the bug again. So I'll be coming up. I've got multiple trips planned for this year coming back up there. Yeah. Once it gets back into your blood, I don't see skipping a year coming back up there, but the caribou thing was a blast. We kind of started there last year on our trip up. We decided to do a float trip. It was a long float trip, ton of fun, and started off with some boo and ended up with some great bull moose as well. And we put those rifles to the test on that one. It was a great time, and
awesome.
It's worked well.
Well, I was going to mention that the kill shot that Brian filmed of you taking that nice bull moose, slightly quartering shot. I mean, you absolutely put that bullet in the perfect spot, and that moose. I mean, tell us how long that moose was on his feet before he staggered down to the ground. It wasn't very long. It wasn't very long.
He went right down. Yeah. He stammered forward a little bit, or stumbled forward, and went down right there. So
that was great.
And he managed to find the puddle, of course. They always do.
Yep. Yeah. Always do. Moose.
It's one of the best feelings in the world when you come off the recoil and just see 4 hooves.
Yeah.
Just going up in the air.
Yeah. 4 giant, beefed up legs just kicking in the air. Crazy.
What did you think of the size of a moose when you walked up to it for the first time?
They never shrink in size. They only get bigger when it comes
there's
to
no
moose.
ground shrinkage at all.
No. It's not like a bear, kind of like the air goes out of a bear when you shoot it.
I think every time you walk up on, I've walked up onto plenty of moose, not from myself, but from other folks and Shiras down here to some of those bulls up there. And every time it blows you away at how big they are.
Yeah.
What did I just do?
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of those. I think it'll always be that way with moose.
Yeah.
It's when you know you're going to have to hammer the supplements when you get back from that. No, and you made a good point with the water. One thing a lot of people might not know about moose in particular, they have a specific knack for this, but when they know they're going to die, they run for the closest body of water they can get to. Yeah. And it doesn't matter how fast they die. And I've seen them run all the way into a lake. And where you literally I've had to use a come along to get them back in. Mm-hmm. You literally take the boat out there, throw a lasso around their head, and drag them back to shore.
Yeah.
My buddy, we went out, and my buddy Clay, I took him out, and we were going after his first moose, and it was a lot of fun. And he had a really quick opportunity to shoot this thing. He did a phenomenal job, put the bullet right where it mattered, and that thing was dead like that. I mean, it was kind of the same situation, but it was running. Mm. And even in the short amount of time that bull fell, because we had to unbury the antlers.
Yeah.
They were practically skid marks to where this thing landed.
Yeah.
And even in that time, it had turned from the direction it was going and headed towards the pond.
Yeah.
That is definitely a thing to pay attention to when you're moose hunting, is if it's near water, it's going to go there if it doesn't drop quick. And two, if you can only see the knees up,
don't shoot.
That's still really deep water.
Don't shoot. Yeah, those. But it's deceptive because you'll see them kind of splashing around. You think, oh, it's just like ankle deep marsh, but you can't see the bottom 2 feet of their legs are in water. And you drop a big bull on that stuff. You know what you're doing for the next 2 days.
Yeah,
but
they're not easy to break down. I think that reiterates the fact that you might want to go with a little bit bigger caliber if you're going for moose.
Yeah,
versus, I agree. A deer hunter from down here that comes up. Yeah, might be his one chance to come up and hunt moose. You might want to beef that thing up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. So talk to us a little bit about that hunt that you guys went on. I know you already mentioned it was a float trip. You spent a lot of time on the river. With the rafts, you brought an alpaca pack raft as well as a couple of bigger frame raft styles, and you went along with a friend of yours up here, Chris, that you guys have hunted with before. So just coming up here, you mentioned that you hadn't been up here in a long time. Talk about the gear that you guys brought up in anticipation for the hunt and things that you really found came in clutch. And other things that you brought up, anticipating to use them based off of what you've done down south, and maybe they didn't work out so well up here, or you didn't even use it at all.
Yeah, we've talked about the raft thing and how invaluable those things are.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for just floating a main stem or anything like that, but it's getting off channel. Mm-hmm. When you look at your surface area for hunting moose, you float these big systems, and there's all these lakes with little feeders that come in there. And, if this lake is a mile off or 2 miles off of the main river channel, you just opened up this entire area to you now,
right?
Because you can shoot something, fairly close to that lake and then float that thing from that lake right down to the main stem. And so it opens up a lot more opportunities for taking a moose. Everybody wants to set some sort of limit as to how far away they're willing to shoot one from water or the strip they're on or the road or whatever. And I feel like the pack rafts for us really opened it up. So now we're able to look in country miles even off of the main channel.
Yeah.
That we just know that if we kill one over there, we can get it in the pack raft and we could either walk it or float it down back to the main channel. So it made sense in our mind, and it worked like a champ. Like we were able to utilize that thing to float meat down back to the main channel in places that would have taken us a heck of a lot longer to shuttle meat, and just walking through that, that tussock. So invaluable there. And then also when you fill the boats that you have, the full frame boats with meat, pack rafts sure are nice to kind of like, they're your overflow. for, for meat. We ended up utilizing not only our pontoon and our big, 15-footer frame boat. We also ended up using both pack rafts. One of them just packed with meat. The other one had plus a little gear and a dude. So they're great for that.
Just thinking back to that reel you guys posted of floating the raft loaded down with meat. And I mean, that channel was barely as wide as the raft itself.
Yep. Oh yeah. I was touching on both sides, the 60-inch bull that I was shuttling down that thing. Scraping sides on that channel, but
sure beats carrying.
The pack rafts I think are the one piece of gear that we figured we would use them a lot because we utilize them down here a lot. We use them to access places that guys aren't willing to, or to float meat out. It just opens up a lot of country for us, especially in the springtime when quick creeks swell. It's a safety piece of gear as well, because oftentimes we'll go into places early in the spring, and how quickly creeks can rise with the snow melt, and you're not getting back across that thing unless you have something like a raft to get you back over.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times that we'll find ourselves going in where we're crossing knee deep. We come back and it's chocolate milk and it's raging,
Right.
Without the raft, we'd be stuck there for who knows how long trying to find a place to get around it.
Yeah.
So they do help there. But on that Alaska trip particularly, those lightweight boats worked very well for us. Another piece of gear that I feel like I lived in the entire trip was I ran a Stone Glacier set of rain gear up there, and it was their M7. It wasn't their lightweight stuff, and I never even had a use for their M7 stuff in the past.
Yeah,
I've ran their lighter weight stuff. I'm willing to pack it, but the insulated stuff, I never even thought of a use for it down here because we're usually covering too many miles and be too warm anyway. You throw rain gear on when you need it. But for a rafting trip like that, and to always have somewhat of a set of rain gear on, I could sit down wherever I needed to. I could break the bull down real easily with a set of gaiters and the rain gear on. It was insulated. It's got that little bit of felt liner.
Yeah.
That set of rain gear that I brought blew me away. Like, I really liked it.
Yeah.
And before that, I thought it was cheesy, and I don't know why anybody'd buy this stuff, but I used it, and sure as heck, man, that was one of the more valuable pieces that I carried with me on that trip.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Yeah,
I know the rain up here in Alaska is, at least in my experience, much colder than some of the rains in the lower 48.
Yeah,
if it's raining here, it's chilly.
Yeah,
it's not.
I know when I met up with you and Brian here in town after that hunt, we talked about the weather and how much you guys were dealing with rain and all that. And I was asking Brian what he was using. Just whenever I meet somebody that I know what they were doing and I kind of know about their hunt a little bit, I like to ask them, what rain gear were you wearing and how'd you like it? Because breathable rain gear is kind of that ultimate argument factor between people up here. Some guys are strictly rubber PVC rain gear style, no breathability whatsoever, because eventually you can wet out breathable rain gear. And while that can be true in some situations, I've had pretty good luck with a lot of different brands and styles of high-end 3-layer waterproof breathable membrane stuff. It's a heck of a lot more comfortable to wear nonstop.
It is.
It moves with you a lot better than the rubber rain gear does.
Yeah.
I have wanted for a long time to see one of these companies that makes breathable rain gear come out with a flexible, rubberized set of rain gear that fits like the breathable stuff does. And that has been something that I have wanted for years. And I know Mo and I have talked about that. You spend time in Southeast Alaska deer hunting and you're just in your rubber suit the whole time. You're climbing over deadfall. It doesn't move well. There's no mobility in it. You just feel like you're
falling down.
Yeah. It's cumbersome to wear nonstop.
And I hope that someday somebody does come out with a good, well designed set of rain gear like that fits better. But that breathable stuff, I wore the M5 non-lined insulation, the M5 rain gear from Stone Glacier on my sheep hunt a couple of years ago, and it worked great. I didn't have any issues with it. I definitely sweated it out on the way out. It was raining intermittently, and it was the thing where, sure, you're going to sweat wearing rain gear, but it's still better to have that barrier between you and the cold water coming from the outside. That's a good way to get hypothermic. You're high exertion and you're dehydrated and you're probably not eating enough on a pack out like that. And I wanted to get it done in one day. And it took me a good while to get it out of there, but back down out of that canyon. But every time you stop and sit down, you just start to freeze and get cold. And had it not been for wearing rain gear, I wouldn't have been able to stop at all, because and people don't realize you can get hypothermic without falling in a river. You can get hypothermic and not even be wet. You don't have to be wet to get hypothermia. And when your body starts to get cold and shut down, and you're not supplying it with any fuel, whether that be electrolytes in your water or eating sometimes a little snack here and there, is all you need. Yeah, just keep that engine going. But yeah, that M5 stuff has held up well for me. I plan on using it a bunch here on my mountain hunts again this year. It's to date, and I've tried some other brands. I'm not going to mention them for their lighter weight, tough rain gear from different companies, and it hasn't always worked all that well for me. To date, I haven't wet the M5 through. So yeah, I can attest that, Stone Glacier seems to have a good recipe of packability and lightweight, and it seems to stay waterproof for a long time.
Yeah, you kind of have to make some compromises, like you were just alluding to, with the flexibility and the mobility you have in a breathable versus a rubberized set of, whatever Grundens. But, hiking with a set of non-breathable. I remember that old Rivers West stuff. You guys ever see any of that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. My gosh. This is raining on the inside, You got wetter on the inside than you did on the outside.
Yeah.
If you went up the stairs in that thing, you were wet. It just didn't breathe at all.
Yeah.
And, like you said so very well, they're just not that mobile. You're always tripping and you can't get your legs over things.
Yeah.
There's no flex to them. And breathable is never going to be, you're not going to go out probably on Kodiak and spend 10 days and not have a little get through at a certain point.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Where your pack straps are connecting and you're flexing and things like that. Inevitably, you'll get a little bit soaked through, from what I've experienced. But when you have a stove at the end of the day, or a teepee to go with it, dry it out.
Right.
Yeah. Very easy to dry that thing out.
Right.
And the next day you're bone dry again. I found that taking a stove, I used to treat it as I would only take it if I knew I absolutely needed it. And now I generally take it more often than not.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the exception of like a summer hunt or something like that. But these spring hunts, we do not leave home without it. We always have this lightweight version stove to combo with the teepee.
Yeah.
And even if it's not cold, if we do take a slip, if we do go in, if we do get a squall that soaks us to the bone for whatever reason, or we're having to go through alder brush in the bottom of some choked out creek, you just get wet.
Right.
And that stove at the end of the day, dry everything out 100%.
Yeah.
And it's quick to do so. And you're back in the game the next day.
Yeah.
So, we utilize that here a lot. We utilized it up in Alaska. And it's great, dry the boots out with a little packable boot dryer, which are available these days.
Yeah.
Great ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Graxol makes a really cool little boot dryer that works really well.
Yeah.
And, but I think there's a compromise to be made with the breathable. I'll take that over the non-breathable any day.
Yeah.
With the exception of if I was going to go do a hunt where I was very immobile, I was not moving very far. Sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you're fishing out there on the water, you know, grab a set of, you know, there's no reason for a breathable set out there if you're going to be spending your day on the water, not moving very much in a boat fishing.
Yeah.
I'll take the rubberized all day long.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're safer that way. But
Right. Well, this is a great spot to transition, and here comes another great segue. You mentioned teepees and stoves. Okay. I have gone back and forth on this for a long time about floorless type shelters in Alaska. And you guys brought yours. I know anybody that watches your film sees that you guys use those teepee style shelters, whether it be from Seek Outside or the new Peak Solitude teepee as well now. But that ultralight shelter, it doesn't weigh hardly anything. It's much lighter than a conventional dome tent style that I honestly I'm still using. And the main reason that I haven't gone to a teepee yet, and keyword being yet, because I plan on trying one out this fall. The main reason is there's so much water and wetland up here that oftentimes you're camped in a soft spot of grass, even up in the mountains up here. The ground is just saturated more often than not.
Yeah.
And when you wake up in the morning and you step outside your tent where you've been sleeping all night, that ground is just, every step you take, there's water bubbling up out of the ground, even up at a couple thousand feet. So talk about your guys' use of teepees up here in Alaska on that hunt for caribou and moose. What solution you guys have for camping on wet land, and obviously the stove is a great option. I'm sure that you guys have a little decision-making process to go where you camp on the availability of firewood. That's another big one. For some guys on a sheep hunt up in Alaska, if you're going to spend your entire time, let's just say up on the Brooks Range, well above tree line the whole time, and you don't have any fuel for your stove, then sure, you might not bring that little titanium wood stove on a hunt like that. But for like a moose and caribou and spots where you're going to have some wood to burn, whether it's alder brush or little, spruce trees that you can use. So yeah, just go ahead and talk about your teepee use up here and what you guys found worked.
Sure. Yeah. So when we came up this year, we did use a teepee. Generally we're camping close to water, close to the river. And we were very strategic about where we placed our camps. Obviously you have to be with a floorless. Some of them were kind of gravel bars to sandy bars, things like that. So a bit of high ground to it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of places that we just couldn't camp with a floorless. Like you alluded to, Dalton, it's too wet. It's like a bog, and that's not a place we want to set up. So, I think floorless work great in a ton of scenarios, and we take them almost 100% of the time on most of our hunts. But a hunt like up in Alaska, I could absolutely see advantages to having the floor. If you got water coming up 2-3 inches in some of these bogs, a floorless is the last thing you want. So, I could definitely see there being an advantage to having multiple different options for different environments, different places. If you're able to park it up on some ridges, you're probably going to be doing fairly well with a floorless. I know in the beginning, back when I started, it was a little nerve-wracking to go away from my floor tent.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, what about the bugs and all the picks and all the things?
Yeah.
And then you start using it, and then you realize it's not that big of a deal. And then you realize there's ways to mitigate even the mosquitoes and things like that. You pin down the sides a little better and maybe even pack a thermocell and you just let it ride in the side of that teepee,
Yeah.
That's every Alaskan's favorite tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I do when I bring my girls anywhere camping anyway.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not going to be sitting here and saying that a floorless is the best in all scenarios everywhere. Probably places it's not. And you might be right. The boggy type areas that you're hunting, you got a nice waterproof, well-sealed floor in places where you might be sinking down a few inches.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you'd it would override a floorless for sure. Yeah. But we brought, like on that trip, man, we had, it was a float trip. So we had cots and, ground tarps and things like that on that one. Felt spoiled having that. The only other time we have cots is when we're taking a bunch of my buddy's llamas in somewhere with the kids or on hunts where we do that. But my experience down here in the lower 48 is I can get away with a floorless everywhere for the most part.
Yeah.
Whether it's breaks country, the thing you might have to deal with a little more is big old spiders. If you're whacked out about spiders, that might bother you. Tick areas, sure. Yeah. But we hunt heavy infested tick areas every spring. Yeah. You could flick 500 ticks off in a day off your body. And I'll sleep like a baby that night in a floorless. Yeah. It takes them a little while to dig in, and I'm pretty sensitive to be able to. Yeah, I'm not going to say I haven't woke up in the middle of the night and, found a tick just starting to burrow into my neck.
Yeah.
That does happen on occasion.
Oh, yeah.
But we're so used to it. And the trip that I took up into Alaska is very different than generally what we're doing down here on our hunts. Our hunts down here, we're much more on our feet, tackling backcountry, going in many, many miles. And so weight savings is huge. We're trying to shave those ounces, and the teepee design, the one center pole, the shape of it handles wind extremely well. We pitch these things on ridges that, because we've had experience, we know how well they handle. You might think this thing is just going to pick up and fly away from you, but the way wind runs over these teepees is pretty impressive. You don't need a Hilleberg to be parked in some of these real super windy areas. These teepees handle great. It's all about the center pole isn't going to fall out unless you haven't staked it well.
Yeah.
So it's on you. If the teepee goes down, that was you having an issue with your staking and not taking the time to find some boulders to put on top of those stakes. And we've been in the most intensive storms on ridges, and you stake it properly, you're not going to have an issue.
And that's been my biggest holdback of buying one. In recent times, I've been researching them like crazy and looking at them. But the biggest thing I was looking at, and that kind of satisfies one of my concerns, is one, how they deal with the wind, because they are bottomless. And so you just kind of have an inch or two at the bottom of it, possibly if you're not on perfectly flat ground, where some of that wind in my head would maybe go underneath and pick it up and everything. And that was one of my big concerns. But one of the other things, having spent some time in these, how does the wind affect the inside of the teepee? If you're sleeping on the ground per se, and you don't have a cot set up, are you feeling that breeze kind of come through during the night?
So and there's different ways you can stake these. When it's warm out, we'll stake these things well off the ground. We'll guy them out a little bit. The guy lines off the stakes on the bottom, we'll elevate it 4 or 5 inches so there's airflow underneath. Yeah. And most of today's teepees have pretty decent ventilation inside. A couple of flaps, 1 or 2 flaps on the top. But in areas where we're trying to keep the wind out, we just stake that sucker right to the dirt.
Yeah.
We just hammer it right into the dirt. Yeah. And then we'll also take the time to seek out a few logs, rocks, and we will build a ground. Yeah, we will build a ground barrier around this teepee. Nice. Not necessarily stacking it onto the sil nylon or the Dyneema, but just building it around. It's amazing the windbreak. Just the rocks that you place in those strategic area, which way that wind's coming from. Man, that does wonders, and we don't have any issues as far as when we're sleeping at night. And one thing I think is pretty cool, like peaks, the solitude that you talked of. So they went a step beyond on helping with the wind mitigation thing, and they built this cross section that you can stick your trucking poles into the top quarter of this. It's almost the top third of this teepee. Yeah. And what you do is it's got slots built into it, and you'll put your trucker up there and you'll kind of push it out.
Yeah.
And it stabilizes that teepee like you can't even believe. You can grab the side of this thing and shake it for all you're worth, and it's just stable.
Really?
So you don't have the effect of one side caving in from an intense wind or directional.
I'm looking at it right
You've
now.
got this
That's awesome.
cross section. It's such a simple thing, but it's genius because it really helps. So
that is
if you
genius.
happen to be the one sleeping on the side of directional wind, it's not going to cave in on you like it would without that. So they nailed it with that little simple design. Easy to just put your trackers up there, expand them a little bit. It solidifies the whole shelter, makes it very stable. If you take off the next day, you just take them out.
Wow.
Go use your truckers.
Yeah. That's
it's
a
pretty slick
really,
design.
really cool feature there.
And you can hang all your wet stuff off there and dry it out with your stove too.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah, that's the other nice thing is it gives you a lot of room up there to hang socks and boots and all that kind of stuff when you run that stove.
Yeah. So I guess I really only have one more question as far as the use of these goes is when you are, because clearly it's bottomless, right? So you're just kind of exposed on the ground. When you're out in, say, the fall time or even the early spring when you're getting the spring rains and stuff like that, do you try to pay attention to your sleep system as far as the insulation goes? Like, do you focus more on synthetic versus down just in case? Have you ever run into issues with kind of, I guess, setting it up in the wrong spot where maybe there was a little bit of a drizzle that night and it kind of starts flowing through a little bit or anything? Do you try to mitigate that at all, or?
I've never had an issue with my down going flat.
Okay.
There was one experience. There's one experience I had on a New Zealand hunt where, man, we were just day after day after day. We were not able to get a fire going. It was extremely wet, humid. It's just the worst temperature. That 33 degree, 34 degree temp. Stuff was melting, and it was just very humid. That was a bit of a struggle on that one. But man, I've come from Washington where we're living in rain, just like Alaska.
Right.
We're September, it could be raining for all 2 weeks of your elk hunt, right?
Yeah.
And you're just very careful about your down bag. I still love my down bag. It's what I'm willing to pack. It compacts easier. It's, maybe if I was on a base camp on a Kodiak type place, I might go with the synthetic.
Yeah.
But honestly, the way we use them and we protect them, once I have that thing under that shelter, never have had an issue with moisture getting to that bag.
Okay.
And again, it comes also back to the stove. With the stove, I'm good. I can dry it out if I was to fall in a creek or something like that. And but that hydrostatic down that they're using in all these bags now, man, it's pretty impressive stuff. It's hard to get these things to really go flat.
Yeah.
That I've found.
And which brand sleeping bag? I'm not sure if you mentioned that or not, but which brand do you tend to go to?
So I've ran the Stone Glacier bag, the Chilkoot 15 for years, quite a few years.
Okay.
And it's done really well.
Are you still running the same one that you started with, or have you replaced it with a new one?
No, I've ran the same 15 degree bag for probably 5 years.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great bag. I've done really well. I've got the 0 degree as well, and I just never take it. It's not that much heavier. It's like 7 ounces heavier.
Yeah.
But if I'm getting into those temps, which we run into often here in Montana, where it's dipping below 0, I'm just throwing on my puff pants and keeping my puff jacket on, and my 15 degree bag is now a 0 or less. Just don't get cold in it. But
exactly,
I will say this: Peaks is currently working on a bag as well. It's not out yet, but we've been playing with it and testing it and using it in all kinds of conditions, and it's pretty awesome. It is pretty awesome.
Well, good.
Again, they're trying to innovate a lot, and this bag is pretty special. So
awesome.
We feel like we've done a lot there to try to create the best bag possible.
That's awesome.
Right on. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm in the market for a new bag right now. So
yeah. Well, let's. I think we should hit on
Well, I know we already touched on the Weatherby, the 338 RPM. We had a bullet point on here to kind of discuss that and just maybe just a brief background about how you guys transitioned into shooting Weatherby rifles. Now, I know that even in your first film that you did with Brian, that one that you mentioned, you guys killed 5 bears on that hunt. That was kind of the flagship product of those spring bear hunts that Brian started making a number of years ago now. And even in that old one, you had the old Mark V ultralight in 300 Win Mag. And then, so you've been with Weatherby and shooting their stuff for many years now. So now Brian and you both are exclusively shooting those. So just give us kind of a backstory about that and how you came to choose working with Weatherby and why you went that route.
Yeah. So, the Weatherby thing it's kind of one of those examples where they build a great product and they've got good leaders. Like, I really appreciate the family behind Weatherby.
Yeah.
I really like Adam and his wife. They're great people. I've had the luxury of hunting with Adam on a bear trip once. We took him out into some wild place and he got a great bear. And I appreciate my friendship with Adam, and again, they used to be out of California. Now they are the rock stars of Sheridan, Wyoming with their new place.
Yeah.
I really like the fact that they bailed out of old California there and went to Wyoming. And I think that was a smart move. Put a lot of good jobs into that town.
Yeah.
And I like the people there and I like their products. They started building these rifles for the mountain hunter. They started, I started with that ultralight. They crushed it with their next model when they came out with that Backcountry RPM. And I ran the Backcountry RPM since it came out. And that thing, you're looking at a 5-pound rifle, top tier at 6.5 pounds. And again, for guys that I'm not looking to shoot a mile, I'm looking to shoot 300, 400 inside of 5. And that's it. And so that lightweight option for me is something I'm willing to pack, and it does the job extremely well.
Yeah.
So I've shot that 6.5 RPM which is tit for tat when it comes to like a 6.5 PRC, right? It's pretty damn close.
Right.
It's a little bit faster, but I really have enjoyed my time using that particular Backcountry RPM, which they've now built in the new 338. And so it's pretty cool that they're targeting these backcountry guys that want a lighter weight option. And I don't want to have the argument with the long range guys that heavier is better and all that. That's great. Again, I come back to like, for how we use it.
Yeah.
The ranges that we're looking to get into to actually take an animal. These lighter weight guns are perfect for us. And I really like the fact that they went that direction and built something specific for us.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. I know when I reached out to Weatherby, it was immediate response and great reception. And I know you'd talked with them about that in the past as well. And the people that I've dealt with there have been real great to deal with, very helpful and answer all my questions. And ever since they came out with that Backcountry rifle and then now the Backcountry 2.0, I felt like they pretty well had the niche of the ultralight, high quality mountain rifle that's able to be mass produced in a factory like that. Normally, I mean, at least pre Backcountry 2.0 models, to get a rifle in that weight class of that 5.5 pound gun for the ultralight mountain rifle, 85% or more people were going to have to go full custom. And you're looking at well over $5,000 for a rifle. And I mean, the grim reality is most of us don't have $5,000 to spend on a gun here and there. And of course, you don't just want one, you want more than one.
And Weatherby did a great job of, and also to mention their Peak 44 sister company now making their own stocks. Mm-hmm. It is a separate company, and I've heard some rumblings of some other things that they have going with Peak 44, and that's awesome. It is independent from Weatherby, but it is a sister company to them. And so all their Peak 44 stocks, that all carbon fiber stock is ultra lightweight. It's really rigid. It's well supported, and they 3D print those hex recoil pads. Mm-hmm. And for anyone wondering what that might be and how could you re-innovate a recoil pad, picture an pneumatic tire where you have those rubber gaps and lines in it.
Because more people know what that is than
can anybody picture that besides Dalton?
I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah. I mean, okay, sorry if I'm the only one that can picture that, but basically,
it's a tire without air.
Right.
That's what that means.
But it's not solid because
the military uses them on some of their vehicles.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, but that recoil pad, it does a great job. Obviously, it's in the name, reducing recoil. Yeah. But it also shaves a couple ounces of weight because now it's not just a solid rubber recoil pad. It has the excess material that you don't need cut out of it. Well, and just every little way that they can trim weight, they've done it.
And there's more to it than just that. There's actually part of the way of that honeycomb, the way that it compresses actually reduces more recoil than a solid pad would.
Right.
What they found is that with especially a honeycomb or a diamond shape, when it's basically as the energy is coming back, it's dispersing in that basic direction. So as you're compressing that airspace there, it's actually creating a little bit better recoil reduction.
I've heard it described as it slows it down.
Yes,
like
it does.
It gives you the feel that you're not getting hit as hard.
Yeah.
And but point being, and they've innovated in so many different little ways here and there. They redid their muzzle brakes. They've added titanium actions. Now they have a carbon fiber barrel option. And just all these things that you used to have to go full custom to get are now available in a factory gun that's well under $5,000. I think that Backcountry 2.0 retails for about $2,700.
Yeah.
So now you have the ability for the consumer to save up a little bit more money than a normal run-of-the-mill factory gun.
Yeah.
But you can get that upper echelon level of product. And in the 6-lug action with that 338 RPM, now you've got a 5.5 pound gun that you can throw up to a 225 grain bullet in and have complete confidence in dealing with bears in a bad situation. But it's also the first gun of that caliber class, at least that I know of, that's that light.
It is.
I'm willing. That I'm willing to pack around. You know.
Yeah, there was one quick. I believe the Ruger Compact Magnum was designed kind of to do the same thing. It just never took off.
Yeah.
So
I had a 300 RCM years ago, and it was just a plastic, injection molded stock, and the barrel wasn't very light. It came with iron sights. It was a nice idea and kind of the same thought process, but the fit and finish and quality of the rifle is nowhere close to what this Mark V is. Yeah,
Weatherby did it right.
Yeah, but I
think they're crushing it. I like all the innovation. They're making a lot of changes. They've gone to building shorter barrels, like you'll see on the recent offering with that 338, an 18-inch barrel, which is awesome for if you're hunting brush country, which you guys do. And they're making a lot of cool changes. I feel like I really like the direction that they're taking it.
I agree.
I just sent in an old carbon mark that I loved, so Weatherby carbon mark, and I just got it re-outfitted with the new Bastion Peak 44 stock.
Nice. I love the Bastion stock.
Shaves some ounces. I just love everything about it. So, no, I did that and just got it back yesterday. In fact, so
nice.
Take it back out and get her all resighted in. But,
very cool.
Yeah, no, I think also in that recoil pad, what's the first thing everybody says when you tell them you're shooting a 338 in a 5 pound offering, right? It's like, wouldn't want to shoot that.
Right.
Guys, it ain't bad. It ain't bad at all. It is not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, they've got that thing. It's not a kitten by any stretch, but
yeah,
it's not as bad as you would think, for sure.
Yeah, I believe.
You know, one thing I've done, I do mix and match brakes on mine. You know, I will put a TI Pro 5-port 338.
Yep.
And that helps as well.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to go on the record with, and maybe you can talk to some people if you if you know them, is I love the Bastion stock, and the rifle I'm getting comes with that one attached to it. My only problem is that, and I think we talked about this on the show before, and I don't like harping on it, but I'm a very tall individual. I'm 6.5 feet tall. I have very long arms, and my length of pull, my LOP, is very large. And so the LOP on those stocks, I believe, is 13.5 inches. That's still an inch and a bit shy of where I need to be. And I was contacting Peak 44, and there's no spacer option. There's no anything like that. I know some of these other companies provide a way to kind of have a little bit of spacer options in there.
Yeah.
Sometimes in 1/8 inch increments or 1/4 inch increments. I'd really like to see that come out as like the next phase.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that on the record. That there's some tall shooters out there that love this, but might like a little bit of extra stretch on that their stock.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. I don't know anybody to talk to about that problem, but
might as well try.
It's funny. My daughter now shoots. Her first rifle, I got her a little 6.5 Creed for her very first one a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it was the Weatherby Vanguard subcompact synthetic, and it was an easy gun for her to shoot. Had a real short LOP, and it was actually adjustable, so she could grow with it.
Yeah.
Or so I thought she would grow with it. But then she started shooting my gun, and then she doesn't even look at that anymore. She shoots whatever I'm shooting, so works out pretty well.
Yeah,
she grew fast.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, speaking of you're taking your kids hunting, I've got 2 daughters now. One's 6 and one's about 3 weeks old. And my 6-year-old, we watched the video that's on the Gritty Stealthy community, on the locals community over there. You taking your daughter Tana hunting, and she's 7, right?
She's 7.
Okay.
Yep.
And you took her on a llama hunt or a bear hunt with llamas. I keep
clarification.
I keep getting that mixed up, but I watched that with my 6-year-old, which she was very excited to watch. She didn't care anything about the bear hunt. All she cared about was the llama. She's asking me what the llamas' names are, and
we had a great time. Kids love llamas. I mean, they're hard not to love. Llamas are cool. I mean, they get a bad rap. They're goofy looking. They don't pack as much as a mule, whatever.
Right.
But I tell you what, safety wise, going into the backcountry with llamas is very safe. You don't ride them. You don't get bucked off them. You don't get broken bones with llamas.
Yeah.
And you don't end up pulling your llama out of a river you just rolled, 300 yards to the bottom of, which we've seen a lot with horses.
Yeah.
So with the kids, llamas are a great fit for us. They just are, because they're safe. They're not something that I have to worry about. My girls would go up and be all over those darn things. Full grown 400-pound male llamas. And I have zero worries whatsoever. So I absolutely love the fact that we have access to these things now, and we can bring our kids on these trips. When you've got a 7-year-old little princess, you end up wanting to pack comfort stuff.
Right.
And maybe Ryan and I don't always pack, but when you have your kids, I think there should be a heavy focus on keeping them comfortable the entire time. So we'll bring snacks that they really enjoy, and cocoa, and extra things. And on that hunt, man, my daughter had I think it was 3 or 4 pairs of shoes, and I don't know how many different dresses and changes of outfits and hairbrushes. books and things to write on and markers. And
yeah,
like one llama was just taken up to, carrying Tana's accessories, I guess. So, but it was really cool. This year she's at a weight level where she can ride a llama. So she rode her favorite llama, this big old stud called Big Ollie. And he's, I think, a 420 pound male. Big old thing, very gentle. We just throw a saddle on it and she rides wherever we want to go. And I like to push these girls of mine and get them to hike. But there comes a point when us old guys, we want to go a little farther. Well, maybe the kids can't go another 5 miles.
Right.
You throw them on the back of a llama and you can get there. It's doable. So the trip that I took with my daughter, we had 10 days to go do this thing. It was kind of just a summer vacation / get her out and to see stuff into the mountains, to hopefully take a bear, to get her a bunch of time with the llamas. And it worked out really well. And, as you saw in the film, there's 2 parts to that thing. The next part will come out this Sunday and kind of shows the start to finish of that trip with her. And she got to see everything that we got to do from, the bear hunting to just going in and camping and spending ridiculous amounts of time glassing. I cheated a little bit. I brought an iPad with a bunch of built-in movies for her to watch because, I'd like to say we don't let our kids be on electronics, but that would be a lie. We do allow it a little bit. And when you're in a place like that and, very long summer days chasing bears, it was nice to have her be able to kind of stop her search of berries every once in a while and grab a movie or whatever, break it up.
Right. Quiet her down. And
yeah. But, we're full plans on doing this again this year. These llamas that we have, they'll pack 100 pounds. They're studs. They take a lot of weight. They allow us to be a little more comfortable back there with the kids. And I've got a trip with my wife and both my daughters this year. My older is 14 and she's going for her first bear this year. She's taken several mule deer, but I think llamas and family trips are, man, it's a pretty cool little marriage there. It works out really well.
Awesome.
They're just easy.
That's great.
I saw my first bears when I was 7, so it got me thinking it's getting pretty close to time to try to get her into the woods a little bit. She caught her first fish last year, all by herself.
Nice.
It was just a 4th of July camping trip, and we were all just, it was midday, hot, and we're just sitting in lawn chairs, just sitting there trying not to sweat too much. And she wanted to fish, so we gave her a pole, and I showed her how to cast. And so she was just had a little spinner on there, and she was throwing it in the creek and reeling it in, and next thing you know, she's screaming. She caught a fish.
No way. That's cool.
Yeah.
And,
that's great.
That was one of the funniest.
I know. Kids are a blast, man. The fishing side is such a fun activity for the kids in the summers.
Yeah.
We've got so many lakes here in Montana where you can just take them up and they can catch grayling and little rainbows to their heart's content very easily.
Yeah.
So it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But,
and I think it's really important to bring the kids out on stuff like this. And if you're a hunter that has children that are coming up in that age, and like you said, I mean, it's important to make sure that they're enjoying the trip. I mean, you want them to be comfortable. You want them to be happy. You want them to look back on it as something that was fun to do. Yeah. And they can toughen up later in life and learn to carry a heavy backpack and a bigger gun and all of that. But making sure that they enjoy it and we kind of perpetuate and pass on that hunting to the next generation is a big thing. And I think that's something that's honestly been kind of lost in the last I wouldn't say several generations, but the last couple at least, with the way the economy's gone and you've got multiple parents working multiple jobs and dad might only have a couple days to go out if he does hunt.
Right.
Doesn't want to drag the kids along to slow them down. But I think it's really important to do that. And I think it's really awesome that you're doing that and Mo, you're going to be doing that soon and everything.
Yeah. With the way the world's going, guys, an investment into your kids and trying to toughen them up a little bit and maybe be a little less offended by things and making them making them do hard things is never a bad deal.
Right.
With a happy compromise of keeping them comfortable. You could break a kid really easily early on.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how you put that, toughen them up a little later. We try to do, make them do hard things, but also reward them with comfort, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think in the end, I've seen it with my older girl, with Paley. She's a tough kid. She's a tough kid. She can do some stuff at 14. And, she's done grueling hikes with me in the early days. I tried to make it as comfortable as possible, but she did a hunt with me back when she was 8 years old. And I had that girl at 8 years old. She did just over 20 miles in 2 days. It was a quick rip up.
Wow.
We killed a bear and we hiked it out. We night hiked it out. We had rain, and every scrap of everything was on my back, of course, but it was cool. And she did it, and she did this incredibly difficult thing.
Yeah.
And now she's in it. She's in it. But I think, I was very cautious of packing things that would keep her comfortable as well.
Yeah.
And making it enjoyable for her. I think it could easily go south on you as a parent if you try to toughen them up too early. And you just go full tilt, learn to suffer, kid. I think that might not work out so well for you in the long run.
Yeah. Well, at that point, they figure out video games are a lot more comfortable, and it's just, it's the wrong route. It's the wrong route to go.
It's funny you say that because, and when you were saying that, helping her, giving her a chance to get comfortable, especially at the end of the day, I grew up, like I said, bear bait when I was 7, trap line shortly after that. And trap line every weekend, riding sleds, which sounds easy, but when you're riding sleds and getting on and off and stopping and you get cold and, it might be 10, 20 below zero, and you're out there all day long. And I did that growing up with my dad. And his idea of lunch was halfway through the day, we'd eat a Snickers and break out the bottle of Gatorade and take a sip out of that. And then we'd keep going. And I enjoyed it after a while, once I got older and learned, and I'm really grateful for him toughening me up like he did. It was a lot, but I know my daughter wouldn't stand up to that, to the same kind of thing.
Yes.
She wouldn't be interested in after a few trips,
Yeah.
Well, and even just things like what you had mentioned, like bringing an iPad with a couple movies or a coloring book. It's really easy to forget that kids aren't quite like adults. Where when we're out there, and let's say you're in a situation where at your camp you can have a fire. Adults, as men and as hunters, we can sit there by the fire and maybe look out at this amazing view and just kind of soak it all in. And that is perfect entertainment right there. Or if you're in a situation where you can't have a fire, you just put your back up against a boulder and you're watching the sun go down. It's just gorgeous and you're just enjoying it. You realize how special that moment is. Kids aren't always that way.
Yeah.
Kids aren't always going to just stare into a fire and think about life. That's because they're going to not be that many years to think about.
They're going to be looking for a stick to catch on fire to then wave around.
I know. Yeah. So
no, you're right. No, for sure. I think we can zone out, blast into the basin we've looked at for 6 straight hours and be fine. But for a kid, that's tough.
Yeah.
So, my girls are, Tana especially, like she can go find a molehill of dirt and have fun with it and play with it for, an hour and entertain herself. But also, introducing some other things. I like doing these little scavenger hunt lists, these little treasure hunt things before we start a trip with the kids. It always gives them something to be looking for throughout.
Yeah.
And the list can vary. It's always like a certain shaped rock to whatever bird or critter we're looking for, to a track, to certain vegetation. And the list can be long, and it just checking those boxes off really keeps them occupied. It always keeps them looking for that next thing.
Yeah.
It's not as good as, throwing snacks at them all day long, but it helps. It's kind of a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I found that it works really well with the kiddos.
Yeah. Well, we're getting towards what I think is probably the end of this one. This ended up being full length, eh?
Yeah. Almost 3 hours.
Yeah. So
appreciate your time.
So let's, I have one more question I'd like to ask, and this is just one that we kind of touched on a little bit, but what would you say out of all of your experience, which is expansive, what would you say is your favorite species to hunt or your favorite style of hunt?
Yeah, we can drop the mic with this one. I'll just say mule deer, high country mule deer.
High country mule deer.
Yeah, high country mule deer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I absolutely love mule deer, and I don't know exactly what it is. They take you to some places that are, in my eyes, the best of places. Those very secluded, remote, high country basins that I just that area attracts me for whatever reason. Yeah. You know, elk hunting is fantastic. I love the interactions of vocalization, I guess, you know, in the elk woods in September. It's a blast. And spring bear, man, it's got me hooked. I think I said it the other day, spring bear is my number 2 trip that I look forward to the most now, behind mule deer.
Yeah.
And a lot of that might have to do with the time of year it is. There's been a gap, you know, and we're itching to get into the woods and hit the mountains.
Yeah.
Everything's coming to life. We're looking for wild onions and morels and trying to fill bear tags and eat all that stuff on the mountain. Those trips are something special.
Yeah.
I really enjoy these spring bear trips. But nothing will ever trump a high country mule deer hunt in some of the most rugged of mountains.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where it's at for me.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, we appreciate your time, Ryan. And again, thanks for being the flagship sponsor of our show. I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done to help us out, and some of the ways behind the scenes that you've aided in the success thus far of our show, and you know, I guess believing in us and being willing to help us get this off the ground. You know, I feel like we've got a unique opportunity to help educate folks and get some good information out there, especially for the Alaska market.
Right.
And we look forward to having you back on again, and everything we can do down the road together. So.
Yeah, no, again, I'll said it many times. I love what you guys are doing and the direction of the podcast that you 3 are putting out. It's great information. So, and then, hopefully we'll be able to hook up again up in Alaska like we did this last season and do some things.
Yeah,
do some
absolutely
good things.
Yeah,
you know, maybe do some hunts and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
awesome.
Looking forward to your guys' success in your future for sure.
Well, while you're on your hunt, you need to be sure that you protect your rifle with a StHealthy Hunter rifle cover. This is usually how we end up ending our show, which obviously you can go over to StHealthyHunter.com and at the checkout, enter the promo code The Northern Hunter, and that'll get you a nice little discount there and also help support our show. So shop the rifle and scope and crown cover option. And the glassing pad, as Ryan mentioned, is also great for a rear shooting support for a rifle rest. And also shop all the supplements. As we've been doing our podcast here, I was sipping on a homemade concoction with the protein powder from StHealthy Hunter and mixed with orange juice. My wife got me hooked on that, so that's my podcast juice. And
secret recipe.
Also visit our other sponsors' pages. We are working with, of course, Weatherby and Hammer Bullets and Batum 907. Those 3 we do not currently have a discount code through right now.
Right.
But we believe in those brands and we like what they're doing. So for your bear baiting needs, which is coming quickly,
season's open when this one comes out.
Yeah, I was going to say I think we're playing ball now when this one comes out. So I will be getting some 907 attractants and lures in here pretty quick out in the field to a couple of bear bait sites, and obviously carrying a Weatherby rifle loaded with Hammer bullets.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, Yukon River Knives is what you're going to need to take your game apart with.
Absolutely.
So head over to yukonriverknives.com and shop any knife you need, from the ATK, the Always There knife and a rifle sling, to the Hunter is a great all-around knife, to like the Green River Skinner for a great fleshing blade. And there also you can get a discount code at checkout that'll get you a nice hefty discount there, and again also help support the show.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a great conversation. I've had a lot of fun, and I know we all really appreciate it. We're very honored to get to spend some time with you. So
yeah,
we'll have to do this again, Ryan.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time, guys.
All right, no problem. And if you guys are wanting to check out Ryan here and look at all their progress, you can look them up on Instagram. Look up either StHealthy Hunter or StHealthy Nutrition. I believe they're both there. If you want to find us, you can search at the Northern Hunter on either Instagram or Facebook. We are present on both. And if you have any questions or comments on anything we talked about today, be sure to send us a message on either one of those, or once you hit the website at thenorthernhunter.com, we have a contact us button there, or you can send us a message directly to info@thenorthernhunter. So, all right, thank you guys. Thank you, Ryan. And catch you next time. Get out there, get after it, and good luck.